You have just woken up as a Komodo dragon on the sun-baked slopes of Komodo Island. For the next 3 hours, you're going to ambush a water buffalo with slow venom, battle a rival dragon in a tail whip clash, and even raid moonlit sea turtle nest sand. None of this will be easy, so good luck. But before we dive into this journey of a Komodo dragon, I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and which animal you'd like me to cover next. Now, let's begin this epic adventure together. The first whisper of light finds you where darkness left you, 3 feet beneath the surface of Komodo Island's sun-baked earth. Your burrow cradles you in perfect stillness, a sandy tomb that holds yesterday's warmth like a gentle promise. The temperature here never varies more than a degree or two, a constancy your cold blood craves after millions of years of evolution have taught your kind that survival begins with the simple art of staying warm. You feel the change before you see it. Somewhere above, photons are painting the scrubland in amber and gold, and though your eyes remain closed, your body knows. Every scale along your massive frame begins to register the subtle shift as heat seeps downward through layers of sand and stone. It's a sensation humans could never comprehend, this deep cellular awareness of thermal gradients, this ancient conversation between your body and the earth itself. Your tongue flicks once, twice, sampling the stale air of your burrow. Even here, buried and protected, information flows across your forked tongue's chemical receptors. The faint trace of your own musk, yesterday's territorial markers, the lingering scent of that water buffalo carcass you abandoned 2 days ago when the meat turned too rank, even for your iron stomach. Your world exists first in molecules, in invisible trails of meaning that paint reality more vividly than any human's eyes ever could. The sand shifts as you begin your emergence. 9 feet of prehistoric patience unfolds with deliberate care, no sudden movements, no wasted energy. Your ancestors learned long ago that haste belongs to prey animals, to creatures that live their lives in panic. You are something else entirely. You are time made flesh, patience carved from scale and sinew. Your massive head breaks the surface first, golden eyes opening to drink in the dawn. The scrubland stretches before you in endless repetition, thorny shrubs, punctuated by ancient trees, volcanic rock formations that jut from the earth like monuments to the fire that built these islands. Everything here speaks of extremes, of a landscape that kills the weak and rewards only the most perfectly adapted. The sun hasn't yet cleared the eastern ridgeline, but its approach announces itself in a dozen subtle ways. The air temperature rises by fractions of degrees. Insects begin their morning chorus, a symphony of survival that will crescendo and fade as the day's heat builds toward its merciless peak. Somewhere in the distance, a yellow-crested cockatoo calls out its territorial claim, and you file this information away with the automatic precision of a creature that has learned to notice everything. Your body emerges fully now, nearly 200 pounds of muscle and armor that moves with surprising grace across the uneven ground. Each step is placed with consideration, massive claws finding purchase on stone and root. You are not built for speed. Your top sprinting pace would barely outrun a jogging human, but speed was never the point. You are built for certainty, for the kind of patient inevitability that makes other creatures nervous without quite understanding why. The first direct sunlight touches your back, and something deep in your brain releases a flood of contentment. This is the moment your kind has waited for, across 65 million years of dawn awakenings. Your scales, dark as volcanic glass, drink in the radiation with an efficiency that would make any solar engineer weep with envy. Within minutes, you feel your core temperature begin its slow climb toward operational warmth. You find your morning's first basking spot with the easy familiarity of long practice, a flat expanse of volcanic rock that faces east, positioned to catch the sun's first offering and hold it close. The stone beneath your belly radiates yesterday's stored heat, creating a perfect thermal sandwich that warms you from both sides. Your heart rate, sluggish from the cool night, begins to quicken as your metabolism awakens. Here, draped across sun-warmed stone like some impossible piece of living jewelry, you begin the day's first great meditation. Basking is not mere laziness, it is engineering. Every degree of temperature gained translates to increased muscle efficiency, faster reflexes, improved digestion. You are solar-powered, a biological machine that runs on starlight converted to heat. The wind shifts, bringing new information. Salt air from the southern coast, where fishing boats sometimes anchor overnight. The green scent of rain-fed vegetation from the highlands. Something else unfamiliar, requiring investigation. Your tongue flicks again, more purposefully now, as you begin to build the day's first scent map. Each chemical signature gets filed away in a mental library that rivals any computer for its precision and recall. A gecko skitters across the rocks nearby, and your eyes track the movement with automatic interest. Not worth the energy expenditure of pursuit, but worth noting. Everything is worth noting. In a world where your next meal might be days or weeks away, where the difference between eating and starving can hinge on a single moment of opportunity, attention to detail isn't just useful, it's survival itself. Your internal clock, calibrated by millions of dawns, tells you the sun will clear the ridge in 12 minutes. When it does, the real warming will begin, and with it, the day's possibilities. Until then, you practice the art your species has perfected above all others. You wait, not with impatience or anxiety, but with the serene confidence of something that has learned patience so thoroughly it has become a form of power. The morning air carries promisescents that speak of deer paths and wild pig wallows, of territorial boundaries that might need reinforcing, of opportunities that will unfold according to their own ancient rhythms. You are ready for all of it, or none of it. Ready, most of all, to let the day teach you what it has to offer, one carefully measured breath at a time. Scenting the savanna, your body temperature has climbed past the threshold where movement becomes pleasure rather than effort. The stone beneath you radiates warmth like a living thing, and your muscles respond with the fluid readiness of a predator awakening. It's time to read the morning's news. Written in molecules across the landscape, you rise with deliberate care, testing each muscle group as blood flow optimizes throughout your frame. Your tongue begins its real work, now not the sleepy sampling of your awakening, but the focused investigation that will map your territory's overnight changes. Each flick draws invisible information across specialized receptors, painting reality in chemical gradients your human observers could never imagine. The acacia scrub stretches before you in familiar patterns, but familiarity breeds precision, not complacency. You know every bush, every game trail, every termite mound within your territory's boundaries, but knowing the landscape and reading its daily stories are entirely different skills. Tonight's rain has washed some scents clean while concentrating others. Morning dew has lifted molecular trails into perfect suspension, creating a three-dimensional library of information that hangs in the still air. Your first steps carry you along the ridge's natural contour, following paths worn by generations of your kind. These are not random wanderings but purposeful investigations, each route chosen to maximize information gathering while minimizing energy expenditure. Your ancestors learned efficiency the hard way, in lean seasons when a single wasted calorie could mean the difference between survival and starvation. The scent of rot reaches you first complex, layered, speaking of opportunities and timing. Your head swings toward its source with the automatic precision of a compass needle finding magnetic north. 40 meters downslope, beneath a cluster of thorny shrubs, something has died recently enough to be interesting. Your chemical analysis is instantaneous and comprehensive. Wild pig, adult female, dead, less than 18 hours, already claimed by something smaller. You file this information with professional interest but no immediate urgency. The carcass represents backup resources, insurance against future hunger, but your metabolism doesn't require daily feeding. Unlike the mammals that share your territory, creatures enslaved by their warm blood's constant energy demands you can afford to be selective, to wait for opportunities that match your efforts precisely. Moving deeper into the scrubland, your tongue samples air currents with metronomic regularity. Each investigation builds upon the last, creating a constantly updating map of your domain's chemical geography. Here, the musk-heavy trail where yesterday's deer procession passed. There, the faint but unmistakable signature of a rival dragon, a younger male whose scent carries undertones of nervous aggression. The rival's trail is 3 days old, already fading, but you follow it anyway, with the thoroughness of a detective. Territory maintenance isn't about dramatic confrontation. It's about information, about knowing who passes through your domain and when. The young male's path speaks of uncertainty, of someone testing boundaries without quite crossing them. His scent markers are sparse and defensive, the chemical equivalent of nervous laughter. You pause beside a sun-bleached termite mound where his trail intersects with something more interesting. Water buffalo. The scent is fresh, complex with stress hormones and the dusty smell of disturbed earth. Your analysis reveals a small herd, probably 5 or 6 animals, moving through your territory sometime after midnight. Their trail leads northeast, toward the seasonal ponds where they'll shelter during the day's heat. This is information worth having. Water buffalo represent the ultimate prize-enough meat to sustain you for weeks, but only if approached with perfect timing and positioning. Your brain begins calculating distances and travel times, weighing the energy cost of investigation against potential rewards. The decision tree that governs your hunting behavior is millions of years old, refined by countless generations of predators who learned to balance ambition with reality. A new scent stream catches your attention, carried on wind currents that flow down from the highland forests. Rain. Not today's weather, but tomorrow's possibility, encoded in atmospheric pressure, changes that your sensitive instruments detect long before any barometer. Rain means behavioral changes across the ecosystem, prey animals seeking shelter, scent trails, washing clean, hunting opportunities, shifting in predictable patterns. Your tongue processes information with pharmaceutical precision, breaking down complex molecular cocktails into their component stories. The sharp bite of cat urine speaks of leopards moving through the canopy roads above. The sweet decay of fallen fruit marks feeding zones where deer and wild pigs will concentrate as morning progresses. Even the seemingly empty air carries intelligence pheromone traces from insects, birds, reptiles, each adding threads to the tapestry of understanding you weave with every breath. Movement catches your peripheral vision, and your head turns with predatory smoothness. A palm-sized lizard freezes on a nearby rock, its own survival instincts screaming warnings about the ancient danger you represent. You regard each other across species, lines, predator and prey, locked in a moment of mutual recognition. The lizard's terror is so pure, it becomes almost respectful acknowledgement of your place in the order of things. You let the moment stretch, neither threatening nor dismissing, simply allowing the small creature to understand its position in the world's hierarchy. After several heartbeats, it flickers away into crevices, too small for your pursuit. The encounter costs you nothing and teaches the landscape's smaller residents a valuable lesson about respect. Your patrol continues through morning shadows that grow shorter with each passing minute. The air temperature climbs steadily, but you're in no hurry to seek shade. Your thermal tolerance exceeds that of almost every other large animal in your ecosystem, an adaptation that allows you to hunt when other predators must rest, to claim opportunities that timing denies to lesser creatures. Each scent investigation builds your understanding of the territory's current state. Food sources, competitor movements, prey patterns, seasonal change, all of it gets catalogued with the automatic precision of an apex predator whose survival depends on perfect information. You are not just hunting, you are conducting surveillance on an entire ecosystem, maintaining the situational awareness that keeps you at the top of the food chain. The morning's intelligence gathering reveals a landscape rich with possibility, but requiring patience to unlock. The water buffalo trail grows more distinct as you follow it northeast, confirming your initial assessment. Their stress signatures suggest they know predators share this territory, but their need for water overrides caution. This is the kind of information that transforms possibilities into plans. Ambush at the watering hole. The water buffalo trail leads you through increasingly familiar terrain, a route you've traveled countless times over the years, reading its moods and opportunities like a favorite book, whose pages reveal new details with each careful examination. The path winds northeast, through stands of lonta palms and clusters of thorny shrubs, following the landscape's natural contours toward the seasonal depression, where rainwater collects in pools that sustain life during the dry months. Your pace remains unhurried, each step measured against energy conservation principles refined across millions of years of predatory evolution. Haste belongs to creatures that hunt with frequency rather than precision. You are something differenter, patient certainty, a biological embodiment of the idea that timing matters more than speed. The buffalo are moving toward water, which means they're following their own internal clock, one you've learned to read through seasons of careful observation. The acacia scrub gives way to more open ground as you approach the water source. Here, the landscape shifts subtly but significantly. Trees grow larger, their root systems tapping into underground moisture that sustains them through the harshest dry seasons. Grass appears in scattered patches, offering better grazing and drawing herbivores into predictable patterns of movement and congregation. Your tongue continues its constant sampling, but now the chemical information grows richer and more immediate. Water scent grows stronger, carrying with it the complex bouquet of a thriving microecosystem. Algae and water plants, insects and their larvae, the waste products of various animals that depend on this oasis of it, creates a molecular fingerprint that speaks of opportunity and abundance. The buffalo trail divides here, splitting into multiple paths that converge again closer to the water's edge. This is typical behavior for prey animals. In dangerous territory, multiple approach routes make it harder for predators to predict exact positioning, reducing the chances of successful ambush. The strategy is sound, evolved through countless generations of survivors who learned that paranoia extends life expectancy. But you've had years to study these patterns, to understand how their caution creates its own predictabilities. The multiple paths may vary in detail, but they all serve the same purpose, bringing large, thirsty animals to the same essential destination. Your hunting strategy doesn't depend on guessing which specific route they'll choose, but on understanding the fundamental logic that governs all their choices. You select your position with the careful consideration of a chess master planning several moves ahead. A cluster of thorn bushes provides natural concealment 30 meters from the primary watering spot. The vegetation is dense enough to break up your outline without restricting your movement, and the ground beneath offers solid footing for the explosive acceleration that will define success or failure in the crucial seconds ahead. The waiting begins not the empty waiting of boredom or impatience, but the focused waiting of a predator whose entire being has aligned itself with a single purpose. Your body settles into absolute stillness, muscles relaxed but ready, breathing slow and controlled. This is meditation made practical, the kind of present moment awareness that Zen masters spend lifetimes trying to achieve, and your species has practiced since before mammals learned to walk upright. Time moves differently during ambush. Minutes stretch like hours, while simultaneously compressing into heartbeats. Your awareness expands to encompass every sound, every scent shift, every change in light and shadow that might signal approaching opportunity. You become part of the landscape itself, a living extension of the thorn bushes and volcanic stone that surround your position. The first sounds of approach reach you as whispers of disturbance in the morning air. Hoofbeats on dry earth, the soft huffing of large lungs, working hard in climbing heat. The occasional low grunt of communication between herd members. Your body responds with subtle chemical changes, adrenaline beginning its slow release, muscles gaining their final edge of readiness, pupils dilating slightly to capture maximum visual information. They appear first as movement through the scrub, dark shapes resolving gradually into individual animals as they follow paths worn smooth by generations of use. 5 water buffalo. As your scent analysis predicted, 4 adults and 1 juvenile, moving with the characteristic caution of prey animals who know they're entering dangerous ground. Your predatory brain automatically begins threat assessment and target selection. The juvenile would be easiest to kill, but offers the least meat. The largest bull presents maximum reward, but also maximum risk. Those horns, and that mass represents serious defensive capabilities. 2 of the adults show signs of age or injury in their movement patterns, subtle limps or favoring that mark them as potentially vulnerable. But target selection remains theoretical until opportunity presents itself. You cannot create the perfect moment. You can only recognize it when it arrives and respond with absolute commitment. Your role now is to remain invisible, to let the buffalo's own behavior patterns bring opportunity within range. They approach the water with ritualized caution. The lead animal, an adult female with scars along her flanks, speaking of previous encounters with predators, advancing in careful stages while the others hold back. She drinks first, head down, but ears constantly moving, alert for any sound that doesn't belong to the morning's natural rhythm. The others follow in turn, establishing a loose semicircle around the water's edge. This is the critical phase, animals focused on drinking, but not yet fully committed to the activity. They remain ready to flee at the first sign of danger, muscles coiled for the explosive flight response that has kept their species alive in a landscape full of ancient killers. You watch and wait, calculating distances and angles with the automatic precision of a biological computer designed for exactly this purpose. 28 meters to the nearest buffalo, too far. Your maximum effective charge distance is roughly 15 meters, close enough to reach your target before it can react and flee, but far enough to avoid premature detection. The herd settles gradually into drinking routine, their initial hypervigilance softening as the immediate area reveals no obvious threats. This is the psychological shift you've been waiting for, the moment when urgent thirst begins to override survival caution. It happens gradually, almost imperceptibly, but your predatory instincts recognize the change, like a musician hearing a key modulation in a familiar symphony. One of the middle-aged females moves closer to your position, drawn by a patch of green grass that the recent rains have coaxed from soil near your hiding place. 18 meters, 16. The arithmetic of opportunity calculates itself without conscious thought, muscle memory, and instinct preparing for the moment when waiting transforms into explosive action. 14 meters. She pauses, head up, nostrils flaring as some primitive warning system suggests caution. This is the moment of truth, the knife edge between success and failure, where patience meets opportunity and timing determines everything. Your body coils like a released spring, every fiber prepared for the burst of speed that will close the gap between predator and prey in heartbeats that will echo through the remainder of your existence. The buffalo takes another step toward the water, 12 meters. The mathematics of death reach their final calculation, and you explode from concealment with 70 million years of predatory perfection driving every muscle fiber. The world compresses into tunnel vision, focused on a single target, a single purpose, a single moment where evolution's longest experiment reaches its logical conclusion. Your jaws clamp down with hydraulic precision, 60 serrated teeth penetrating hide and muscle, while specialized glands release their ancient cocktail of bacterial cultures and toxins. The buffalo's surprise transforms into pain, then terror, as it realizes what has happened. But understanding comes too late. The damage is done. The biological countdown has begun, and time itself becomes your ally. In the slow certainty of what follows, the buffalo breaks free, as you knew it would, as you planned for it to do. Your venom doesn't kill quickly, it kills certainly. Over the coming hours or days, bacterial infection will spread through the wound site, while anticoagulants ensure continued bleeding. Your prey will weaken gradually, predictably, following biological scripts written long before the first human learned to make fire. You settle back into waiting, this time with the patient satisfaction of knowing that success is now a matter of time rather than chance. Somewhere ahead of you, a water buffalo carries death in its bloodstream, and all you need to do is follow at a respectful distance until mathematics completes its grim equation. Basking, digestion. The buffalo's trail is easy to follow now, marked not just by hoofprints and broken vegetation, but by the metallic scent of blood and the increasingly erratic pattern of an animal beginning to understand that something fundamental has changed in its relationship with the calm world. You maintain your distance, perhaps 50 meters behind, close enough to track but far enough to avoid triggering the desperate flight response that might carry your prey beyond your territory's familiar boundaries. The chase, if it can be called that, unfolds with the inevitability of a mathematical proof. Your venom works with bacterial precision, each component designed by millions of years of refinement to achieve maximum efficiency. The anticoagulants prevent the wound from sealing, ensuring steady blood loss that will weaken your prey over time. The tissue-destroying enzymes begin their microscopic feast, breaking down cellular structures and creating the perfect environment for the cocktail of pathogenic bacteria that your saliva delivers with every bite. You are not pursuing so much as accompanying your prey toward its appointment with destiny. This is hunting stripped of drama and reduced to pure biological process patient, certain, inexorable. The buffalo stumbles occasionally now, pausing to rest more frequently, its body beginning the slow surrender that your attack has made inevitable. By midday, the outcome is no longer in question. The buffalo has sought shade beneath a cluster of lontar palms, lying down in the partial relief they provide from the sun's increasingly brutal attention. Its breathing has grown labored, sides heaving with the effort of maintaining basic physiological functions while fighting systemic infection and blood loss. You position yourself in nearby shadows, content to wait for the final phase of this ancient drama to reach its conclusion. The animal dies as the sun reaches its zenith, a quiet surrendering that speaks more of exhaustion than pain. One moment it breathes, the next it doesn't, and the transition is so subtle you almost miss it. Only the sudden stillness, the cessation of the rhythmic rise and fall that marks the difference between meat and carrion, announces that your patience has been rewarded. You approach the carcass with the reverent attention of a creature that understands the true value of such opportunities. Nearly 400 pounds of protein and fat, enough sustenance to carry you through weeks of lean hunting. This is why your kind evolved patience as a hunting strategy, because when success comes, it comes in abundance that justifies every hour of waiting, every day of hunger, every failed attempt that, teaching experience, without providing reward. But first, the carcass must be relocated. Leaving your kill in the open invites theft from the ecosystem's other opportunists: wild pigs, monitor lizards, birds of prey, even other dragons who might claim scavenging rights if you're not careful about establishing possession. Your jaws clamp around the buffalo's neck, and you begin the laborious process of dragging nearly twice your body weight toward more suitable dining accommodations. The journey takes the better part of an hour, your powerful neck and shoulder muscles working in steady rhythm as you haul your prize across uneven ground toward the rocky outcropping you've selected. The destination is perfect for your purpose, a flat expanse of volcanic stone that faces southwest, positioned to catch and hold the afternoon sun's thermal energy while providing good sightlines for detecting potential competitors. You arrange the carcass with the careful attention of a chef preparing a feast, positioning it to maximize your access to the choicest portions while ensuring that your own body can benefit from the stone's radiant heat during the long digestion period ahead. This is engineering as much as eating thermal management that will optimize your metabolic processes while you work through the complex biochemistry of processing such a substantial meal. The first bites are ceremonial, almost ritualistic in their deliberation. Your teeth, designed for tearing rather than chewing, work to separate manageable portions from the whole. You swallow chunks of meat and bone that would choke most predators. Your flexible throat and powerful esophageal muscles accommodating masses that seem impossible for even your substantial frame. With each swallow, your body begins the remarkable process of shutting down non-essential systems to focus entirely on digestion. Your heart rate slows to an almost meditative rhythm. Your breathing deepens and becomes less frequent. Blood flow redirects away from your extremities and toward your digestive organs, which will spend the coming hours breaking down protein and fat with industrial efficiency. The stone beneath you radiates heat like a natural warming pad, its dark surface having absorbed solar energy throughout the morning and now releasing it in gentle waves that seep through your scales and into your core. Your body temperature climbs to its optimal range for digestive chemistry, enzymes activating with clockwork precision to begin the long process of converting buffalo into dragon. You settle into the peculiar motionlessness that follows a major feeding not sleep exactly, but a state of profound conservation where consciousness exists at its most basic level. Your eyes remain open but unfocused, aware of your surroundings but not actively processing threats or opportunities. This is meditation enforced by biology, a necessary shutdown of higher functions, while your body dedicates its resources to the essential work of nutrition. Time becomes fluid during these digestive marathons. Hours pass like minutes while simultaneously stretching toward infinity. The sun tracks across the sky in slow motion, shadows shifting and rotating around your basking site as the earth turns through its daily rhythm. You are dimly aware of these changes, but participate in them only as a passive observer, your attention turned inward to the complex biochemistry unfolding in your gut. Small scavengers begin to appear, drawn by the scent of fresh meat and the opportunity to claim whatever scraps your feeding might provide. Flies arrive first, their buzzing forming a constant background chorus that speaks of abundance and opportunity. Beetles follow, then ants, creating a miniature ecosystem centered around your dining room. A pair of yellow-crested cockatoos lands nearby, intelligent eyes assessing the situation with the calculating gaze of creatures that have learned to profit from predatory success. They maintain a respectful distance, understanding instinctively that even a motionless dragon represents potential danger, but their presence indicates their willingness to wait for opportunities. You tolerate these hangers-on with the benign indifference of a creature secure in its position at the ecosystem's apex. Some of them, particularly the smaller scavengers, actually provide useful services, cleaning parasites from your scales and removing debris that might otherwise require your attention. It's a relationship that benefits everyone involved, predator and scavenger alike, finding advantage in cooperation. The afternoon heat builds toward its daily crescendo, but your thermal tolerance allows you to remain comfortable in conditions that would drive other large animals to seek shade. Your dark scales, perfectly adapted for solar collection, drink in the radiation and convert it to the steady warmth that optimizes every aspect of your digestive chemistry. You are a living solar panel, a biological heat exchanger that transforms sunlight into the energy needed to process your substantial meal. As the hours pass, Your stomach acid, powerful enough to dissolve bone, begins its work on the buffalo's remains. Your digestive system, evolved to extract maximum nutrition from infrequent but substantial meals, processes every component with remarkable efficiency. Proteins break down into amino acids, fats render into fatty acids, even bones contribute calcium and phosphorus to your body's mineral requirements. The metabolic changes are profound and systematic. Your liver works overtime to process nutrients and filter toxins. Your kidneys adjust their function to handle the increased waste products of protein metabolism. Even your immune system shifts into a different configuration, managing the bacterial load that inevitably accompanies scavenging and carrion feeding. Dreamlike awareness drifts through your consciousness during the deepest phases of digestion. Ancestral memories, encoded in genetic patterns, seem to surface echoes of countless other feedings, other successes, other moments when patience and precision combined to provide sustenance. You are connected to an unbroken chain of predatory success, stretching back through geological time. Each link forged by creatures who learned to balance energy expenditure with caloric return. The sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, shadows lengthening across the rocky outcropping where you continue your digestive meditation. Your body temperature remains stable, the stored heat in the volcanic stone providing steady thermal input even as air temperatures begin their evening decline. This is thermal engineering at its most sophisticated, using environmental resources to maintain optimal internal conditions without expending precious metabolic energy. Your conscious awareness remains minimal, just enough to register potential threats or opportunities without fully engaging your higher brain functions. This is conservation taken to its logical extreme. Every available calorie dedicated to the essential work of converting buffalo into the protein, fat, and minerals that will sustain you through the weeks ahead. Small movements occasionally disturb the general stillness. The adjustment of a limb to maintain optimal positioning, the slow blink of eyes that continue their minimal surveillance duties, the almost imperceptible rise and fall of breathing so slow it seems to belong to something geological rather than biological. You have become a living landscape feature, as much a part of the rocky outcropping as the stone itself. Territory patrol. The sun hangs lower now, its angle shifted enough to change the quality of light filtering through the acacia scrub. Your digestive processes have reached their initial peaks, the major work of breaking down and absorbing nutrients well underway, allowing higher brain functions to gradually re-engage with the world beyond your internal chemistry. Time to assess the territory's current state and address any boundary maintenance that the day's hunting activities might have postponed. You rise with the careful deliberation of something carrying substantial cargo, your movements adjusted to accommodate the buffalo-heavy reality of your current condition. This is the peculiar physics of successful predation: temporary immobility traded for weeks of nutritional security. Your gait adapts automatically, center of gravity shifted to accommodate the substantial meal still processing in your expandable stomach. The afternoon light reveals your territory in different moods than the morning's exploration uncovered. Shadows have rotated, hiding some features while exposing others. Scent trails have evolved throughout the day, some fading as heat breaks down molecular structures, while others concentrate in cooling air. You begin your patrol with the systematic attention of a property owner conducting essential maintenance. Your first destination is the northern boundary markera, distinctive volcanic outcropping, where you've maintained territorial signs for the better part of a decade. The rocks here hold scent longer than most surfaces, their porous nature providing microscopic reservoirs that release territorial claims gradually, ensuring maximum longevity for your chemical communications. The approach reveals interesting intelligence. That young male whose trail you investigated this morning has been here more recently, probably within the last few hours. His scent markers overlay yours with nervous persistence, the chemical equivalent of graffiti painted over established territorial declarations. This represents a challenge that requires attention, though not necessarily immediate confrontation. You investigate his signs with professional thoroughness, your tongue sampling the complex molecular information he's left behind. Age, health status, stress levels, recent diet, all of it available to your chemical analysis like reading a detailed biological resume. The young dragon is well-fed, which suggests hunting competence, but his stress signatures indicate uncertainty about his territorial ambitions. Your response is measured and diplomatic, rather than aggressive overmarking that might escalate territorial tensions. You add your own fresh scent markers adjacent to his, creating a chemical dialogue that acknowledges his presence while firmly asserting your own established claims. This is boundary maintenance at its most sophisticated communication that avoids the energy costs of direct confrontation while making territorial positions absolutely clear. The patrol continues along established routes that wind through your domain's natural features. Each significant landmark requires inspection and renewal scent posts that mark important hunting areas, claw marks scratched into suitable trees, strategic scat deposits that announce your presence to anyone investigating your territory. This maintenance work is essential infrastructure, the chemical and physical signage that maintains order in a landscape where invisible boundaries determine life and death. At the eastern boundary, where your territory borders the domain of an older female, you discover evidence of diplomatic success. Her scent markers remain respectfully on her side of the traditional boundary, showing none of the territorial pressure that sometimes develops between neighboring predators. This relationship has remained stable for several years now, both of you benefiting from the predictable peace that allows maximum hunting efficiency. Your own boundary maintenance here reflects this diplomatic stability. Fresh scent markers placed with careful precision, close enough to the border to assert your claims but not so close as to suggest aggressive expansion. This is international relations conducted in molecules, treaty negotiations written in chemical signatures that both parties understand implicitly. Moving south toward the seasonal creek bed that forms another natural boundary, you encounter more complex territorial intelligence. Multiple scent trails intersect here, your own regular patrol routes, the established paths of various prey species, and something else that requires careful investigation. Another dragon, but not one of your familiar neighbors. This stranger's trail is perhaps 2 days old, already fading but still readable to your specialized senses. Adult male, larger than the nervous youngster but not approaching your own substantial size. His scent signatures suggest a transient rather than a territorial challenger, someone passing through rather than seeking to establish competing claims. Nevertheless, his presence represents information that needs to be documented and understood. You follow his trail for several hundred meters, reading the story of his passage through your domain. He moved with the careful respect of someone who understood he was trespassing, avoiding major hunting areas and keeping to the less desirable margins where his presence wouldn't directly challenge your resource claims. This is encouraging behavior, suggesting a mature individual who understands territorial etiquette. His trail leads toward the southern highlands, terrain that becomes increasingly unsuitable for creatures of your size and thermal requirements. This explains his transient statushes likely seeking new territory in areas where established dragons like yourself find the environmental conditions too challenging for permanent residence. His passage through your domain represents navigation rather than invasion. You mark his trail with your own scent markers, not aggressively but informationally. Future investigators, whether the transient himself or other territorial neighbors, will understand that his passage was noted and evaluated, but not considered threatening enough to require direct response. This kind of chemical communication prevents misunderstandings that might otherwise escalate into unnecessary conflicts. The patrol route curves back toward the western reaches of your territory, where the landscape opens into broader grasslands that attract large herbivores during the wet season. These areas require different maintenance, strategies less intensive scent marking, but more frequent visual surveillance to monitor prey movements and potential competitor activity. Here you encounter one of your favorite territorial landmarks, a massive baobab tree whose ancient trunk bears the claw marks of generations of dragons who have claimed this area. Your own contributions to this living monument span nearly 15 years, a historical record of your territorial tenure carved into bark that will outlive you by centuries. You add fresh claw marks below your existing scratches, the ritual satisfaction of the activity connecting you to the long chain of predators who have maintained territorial claims in this landscape. The tree's scarred surface tells stories of dominance and succession, of territorial battles won and lost, of the slow rotation of apex predators through ecological time. The afternoon light continues its gradual shift toward evening, reminding you that territorial maintenance, like all activities, must be balanced against energy conservation and thermal management. Your substantial meal provides the caloric security that makes such extensive patrolling possible, but efficiency remains important even in times of abundance. Your final patrol destination takes you to the central highlands of your territory, where a collection of termite mounds creates a distinctive landscape feature that serves as both hunting ground and territorial landmark. The termite colonies attract various prey species, making this area particularly valuable from a resource management perspective. The mounds themselves show evidence of recent activity: fresh construction, repair work on weather-damaged structures, the constant industry of social insects, creating architecture that will outlast most of the vertebrates that depend on it. You investigate several mounds with professional interest, noting which ones show signs of recent excavation by other predators seeking easy protein sources. This ecosystem within your territory requires its own form of management. You avoid disturbing the termite colonies directly, understanding instinctively that their continued productivity benefits your own long-term hunting success. The mounds attract prey animals, provide landmarks for navigation, and create microclimates that influence local weather patterns. Protecting them serves your territorial interests in ways that extend far beyond immediate hunting opportunities. As the sun approaches the horizon, you complete your patrol circuit with the satisfaction of essential maintenance accomplished. Territory inspected, boundaries reinforced, competitor activities documented and addressed, resource areas surveyed and protected. Your domain remains secure, your claims clearly established, your position in the territorial hierarchy reaffirmed through chemical communication and physical presence. The day's activities, hunting, feeding, patrolling, represent the fundamental rhythms that have governed your kind since long before mammals learned to walk upright. You are living archaeology, a successful experiment in predatory efficiency that has required no significant modifications across millions of years of environmental change. Your territory spreads around you in the golden light of approaching evening. Every hectare familiar, every resource catalogued, every boundary precisely defined. Tomorrow will bring new opportunities and new challenges, but tonight you rest secure in the knowledge that your domain remains yours, defended and maintained, according to protocols refined across geological time. The ancient cycle continues, patient and certain as the turning of the earth itself. Rival in the scrub, the morning heat shimmers across the thorn bush when you first catch his scent. Another male, perhaps 8 feet from nose to tail tip, has wandered into what you consider your domain. The wind carries his musk, mixed with the metallic tang of old blood he's been feeding recently, which means he's strong, confident, dangerous. You pause beneath the skeletal remains of a tamarind tree, tongue flicking out to taste more of his presence in the air. Each sample tells you more about this intruder. He's mature, probably close to your own age of 15 years. His territorial markings are fresh, scraped deep into the red earth near a cluster of rocks that you've used as a lookout point for the past 3 months. This is not a young dragon seeking safe passage through your territory. This is a challenge. The scrubland stretches before you in waves of brown and gold, punctuated by the occasional green splash of a surviving shrub. Somewhere in this maze of thorns and stones, he waits. You begin to move, each step deliberate and measured. Your claws find purchase on sun-baked earth that crumbles slightly under your 150-pound frame. The heat radiates up through your belly scales, but you ignore the discomfort. This encounter will determine who controls the best hunting grounds, the prime basking spots, the water sources that mean survival in this harsh landscape. You find him 20 minutes later, positioned on a low ridge that overlooks a game trail. He's magnificent in the way that only an apex predator can be: muscled shoulders, bunching beneath grey-brown scales, head held high to catch every scent on the breeze. When he notices your approach, neither of you moves for a long moment. You study each other across 30 feet of rocky ground, two ancient killing machines taking each other's measure. The first display begins almost ceremonially. He raises himself higher on his powerful legs, making his already impressive bulk appear even more substantial. His throat pouch inflates slightly, catching the light in a way that emphasizes the yellow-orange coloring beneath his chin. You respond in kind, lifting your own frame to its full height, feeling the familiar stretch of muscles that have carried you through countless hunts and territorial disputes. Slowly, deliberately, he begins to move, not toward you, but parallel to your position, keeping the same distance while his body language speaks volumes. His tail, thick as a man's thigh, sweeps from side to side in measured arcs. Each movement is controlled, powerful, a demonstration of the weapon that can shatter bones or deliver stunning blows. You mirror his display, your own tail cutting through the air with practiced precision. The dance escalates gradually. He takes a step closer, tongue darting out to taste your scent more directly. You hold your ground, head tilted at an angle that shows both attention and mild threat. His next movement brings him within 20 feet, close enough that you can see the small scars that crisscross his snout, evidence of previous battles won and survived. When he performs the first lateral jerk, your body responds with inherited knowledge older than memory. He throws his massive frame sideways, a sudden violent motion that demonstrates both agility and raw power. The display says, "I can move like lightning when I choose to strike." You answer with your own lateral movement, perhaps even more dramatic, your body becoming a blur of scales and muscle for the briefest instant before settling back into watchful stillness. The jerking display continues, each movement more aggressive than the last. He whips his body left, then right, the motion so sudden that small stones scatter beneath his claws. You respond with equal force, your own frame cutting through the air in displays that would terrify any smaller creature. But you are not smaller creatures. You are equals, and that recognition makes this confrontation both more dangerous and more necessary. The moment when posturing becomes violence arrives without warning. Perhaps he reads some slight movement in your posture as weakness, or perhaps the testosterone flooding both your systems finally overwhelms restraint. He lunges forward, not quite attacking but closing the distance between you with shocking speed. You meet him halfway, and suddenly the careful ritual dissolves into something primal and brutal. Your bodies collide with a sound, like two trees falling simultaneously. Claws rake against scales that have evolved to turn aside such attacks, but the force behind each swipe is enormous. He attempts to grab your neck, the classic killing technique that has served your species for millions of years, but you twist away and counter with a tail strike that catches him across the ribs. The impact echoes across the scrubland like a gunshot. You grapple now in deadly earnest, two perfect predators locked in a contest that will leave one dominant and the other either dead or exiled. His jaws snap inches from your shoulder as you drive forward with your powerful hind limbs, trying to knock him off balance. The taste of his breath fills your mouth meat and blood, and the sharp chemical edge of stress hormones. The fight becomes a slow-motion catastrophe of scales and claws and crushing jaws. Every movement carries the weight of evolutionary perfection, muscles that can deliver bone-breaking force channeled through bodies designed for exactly this kind of confrontation. You feel his claws rake across your flank, leaving shallow furrows that burn in the dry air. Your own attack opens a gash above his left eye that begins to weep blood into his vision. Time stretches and contracts. Seconds feel like hours as you struggle for advantage, each seeking the grip that will end this confrontation permanently. Your tail becomes a weapon and a balance tool, sweeping his legs while keeping you upright when he attempts the same tactic. The dust you raise creates a small sandstorm around your writhing bodies, making the battle appear even more like some ancient myth brought to life. When the end comes, it arrives through exhaustion rather than decisive victory. Both of you have fought with everything evolution gave you, and both have proven your worthiness to claim territory in this harsh landscape. He breaks away first, taking 3 careful steps backward while keeping his eyes locked on yours. Blood drips from several wounds, but his bearing remains proud, unbroken. You allow the distance to grow, your own body screaming from a dozen impacts and tears. The hierarchy has been established not through one dragon's defeat, but through mutual recognition of strength. He will find his own territory, perhaps on the far side of the valley where the hunting is almost as good. You will keep these hunting grounds, these water sources, these perfect basking rocks. The price of dominance has been paid in blood and exhaustion, but the reward is survival itself in a landscape that offers no participation trophies. As he disappears into the thorny maze of scrubland, you begin the slow process of licking your wounds and reclaiming your kingdom. Feast with scavengers. 3 days have passed since your territorial battle, and the morning sun finds you returning to the site of your last successful hunt. The young wild boar you brought down near the dry riverbed has been ripening in the heat, and your sensitive nose tells you the meat has reached perfect tenderness. But you are not the only one who has discovered this feast. The carcass lies partially concealed beneath a fallen log, exactly where you cached it after your initial feeding. Your powerful jaws had opened the body cavity on the first day, consuming perhaps 30 pounds of the choicest organs and meat before the midday heat drove you to seek shade. Now, returning with the deliberate hunger of a creature who can fast for weeks but chooses to feast when opportunity presents itself, you find that your dinner table has acquired uninvited guests. 2 smaller monitor lizards, perhaps 3 feet in length, scatter as you approach. These are your distant cousins, scaled-down versions of your own magnificence, and they know better than to challenge your claim to the carcass. They retreat to a respectful distance, settling into the patient stillness that characterizes scavengers everywhere. Their dark eyes remain fixed on you and the feast, waiting for the moment when you will be satisfied enough to allow them their turn at the remains. Above, black kites wheel in lazy circles, their keen eyes marking your return to the kill. These birds have followed the scent of death from miles away, and they too understand the hierarchy of the feast. They will wait for you to take your fill, then compete with the smaller monitors for whatever scraps remain. This is the ancient order of things, written into the behavior of every scavenger species that has learned to follow the great predators. You circle the carcass once, testing the air for any sign that another large predator has claimed your kill in your absence. The scents tell you only of the smaller visitors who have nibbled at the edges but dared not disturb the main body of your cache. Satisfied that your property rights remain intact, you settle into position beside the pig and begin the serious business of feeding. Your jaws are evolutionary masterpieces, hinged and muscled to deliver crushing force that can snap the leg bones of water buffalo. When you bite down on the boar's rib cage, the sound carries across the scrubland like breaking kindling. The bones splinter and crunch between your teeth, releasing marrow and blood that floods your mouth with rich nutrition. This is food as pure energy, protein, and fat that will fuel your massive frame through the coming weeks. The smaller monitors creep closer as you feed, drawn by the sounds and smells of the feast. but still maintaining careful distance. One of them, bolder than its companion, ventures within 10 feet of your position. You pause in your feeding to fix it with a steady stare, jaws still dripping with blood and tissue. The smaller lizard freezes instantly, reading the clear message in your gaze. This is still your kill, your feast, your domain. But you are not needlessly aggressive toward these lesser scavengers. They serve a purpose in the ecosystem of death and consumption that surrounds every successful kill. When you have taken what you need, they will clean the remaining meat from bones too small for your massive jaws to bother with. The kites will pick at sinews and scraps, and eventually the ants and beetles will reduce everything to clean bone that will bleach white under the endless sun. You return to your feeding, working your way methodically through the choicest portions of the carcass. Your throat can expand to accommodate chunks of meat that would choke smaller predators, and you swallow sections of ribcage whole, feeling them slide down into your powerful stomach, where acid strong enough to dissolve bone will continue the digestive process. The taste of blood and fat coats your mouth, satisfying hungers that run deeper than mere nutrition. The sun climbs higher as you feast, and the heat begins to shimmer off the rocky ground around the kill site. Flies arrive in increasing numbers, drawn by the scent of exposed meat and the promise of places to lay their eggs. They buzz around your head in clouds, but you ignore them with the stoic patience of a creature that has dealt with such annoyances for millions of years of evolution. After an hour of steady feeding, you have consumed nearly 40 pounds of meat and bone. Your belly bulges slightly with the load, and the familiar satisfaction of a successful hunt settles over your mind like a warm blanket. This is what your body was designed for: the patient hunt, the explosive moment of the kill, and the leisurely consumption of the rewards. You move away from the carcass slowly, each step deliberate and dignified. The smaller monitors watch your retreat with keen attention, waiting for the moment when etiquette will allow them to approach the remains. You settle onto a flat rock, perhaps 20 feet from the kill, close enough to defend your property if necessary, but far enough to signal that the secondary feeders may now approach. The transition happens with the smooth choreography of countless such scenes played out across evolutionary time. The smaller monitors advance cautiously, testing your mood with every step. When you remain still on your basking rock, they grow bolder, and soon both are tearing at the remaining meat with their own smaller but efficient jaws. The kites descend from their aerial patrol, landing with awkward hops and flaps near the edges of the feast. They wait their turn with the patience of creatures who understand that survival often depends on knowing one's place in the natural order. One of the smaller monitors briefly challenges a kite for access to a particularly choice morsel, but the dispute is settled quickly with threat displays rather than actual violence. You watch this feeding hierarchy unfold with the detached interest of an apex predator. The smaller monitors will take what meat they can carry, probably caching portions for later consumption, just as you did with the original kill. The kites will clean up scraps and expose new areas of meat for the monitors to access. By tomorrow, only bones and hide will remain, cleaned so thoroughly that nothing useful will go to waste. The heat of the day settles over the scene like a heavy blanket, and you feel the familiar lethargy that follows a large meal. Your body temperature rises as the sun beats down on your dark scales, and soon you will need to seek shade to avoid overheating. But for now, you are content to bask and digest, watching the ancient drama of scavenger and carrion play out before you. The flies hum their endless song over the remains of your kill, and the smaller monitors work with single-minded efficiency to extract every calorie from the carcass. This is the natural order, the way things have been since your ancestors first learned to hunt in these dry lands millions of years ago. You are the apex, the primary beneficiary of death and feast, and all other scavengers arrange themselves according to your whims and satisfaction. As the sun reaches its zenith, you finally rouse yourself from your basking rock and begin the slow journey toward shade. Behind you, the feast continues according to the eternal protocols of scavenger hierarchy. each species taking its assigned portion from the bounty of your hunting success. Dry season drought. The sun has become your enemy. For 3 months now, it has burned in a cloudless sky the color of bleached bone, transforming your island home into a furnace of cracked earth and withered vegetation. The temperature soars past 100 degrees before noon, and the rocks that once provided comfortable basking spots now radiate heat that could cook meat. You move through this transformed landscape like a ghost of more prosperous times, conserving every calorie of energy for the essential business of finding water. Your daily routine has contracted to the most basic elements of survival. Dawn finds you emerging from whatever shade you claimed the night before, tongue flicking out to taste air that carries no hint of moisture. The morning hours, those precious few before the sun gains its killing strength, become your window for movement. You have perhaps 3 hours to cover ground, to search for the ever-shrinking pools that mean the difference between life and death. The geography of thirst has rewritten your understanding of territory. Places that once seemed unremarkably ordinary have become precious beyond measure, while hunting grounds that provided easy meals throughout the wet season now stretch empty and barren. The small creek that meandered through the heart of your domain dried up 6 weeks ago, leaving only a depression in the earth marked by the skeletal remains of fish and the deep gouges where desperate animals tried to dig for groundwater. Your body has begun the careful process of rationing itself. Movement becomes an economic calculation, every step weighed against the energy it will cost and the water it will require through increased respiration. You no longer patrol your full territory with the casual confidence of abundant times. Instead, you follow a contracted circuit that connects the few remaining water sources you have discovered in your increasingly desperate searches. The limestone caves scattered throughout the central hills have become sanctuaries of survival. These ancient formations, carved by water in ages past, now provide the only reliable escape from the sun's murderous attention. You have claimed the largest of these caves as your primary refuge, a chamber deep enough to remain cool even during the hottest afternoons. The rock walls weep tiny droplets of condensation during the early morning hours, and you have learned to position yourself to catch these precious beads of moisture on your tongue. Memory becomes both torment and guide during these harsh days. You remember the wet season that ended 8 months ago, when water fell from the sky in torrents that turned every depression into a temporary lake. Rain drummed against your scales with such abundance that you barely noticed it, taking for granted the pools that formed everywhere and the easy hunting that came with animals gathering at countless water sources. Now those memories seem like dreams of paradise, distant and possibly imagined. The few water sources that persist have become centers of desperate congregation. At the largest surviving pool, hidden in a rocky gorge 3 miles from your cave, you encounter other survivors of the drought. Wild pigs arrive at dawn and dusk, their usual caution overcome by the simple necessity of drinking. Small deer venture down from the hills with nervous, darting movements, ears constantly scanning for predators, even as they thrust their muzzles deep into the murky water. You could hunt at these water sources, and in fact you have taken several animals who grew careless in their thirst. But the calculus of drought hunting differs dramatically from the casual predation of abundant times. Every hunt must guarantee success, because failure means energy wasted that cannot be recovered. The wounded animal that escapes during the dry season might mean the difference between your survival and starvation. So you choose your targets with surgical precision, waiting for the perfect opportunity rather than chasing possibilities. The pool itself has shrunk from a small pond to a muddy depression perhaps 10 feet across. The water that remains tastes of minerals and desperation, thick with the concentrated essence of survival. Algae grows in green mats across the surface, and the bottom churns with the movements of desperate fish crowded into water, too shallow to properly contain them. You drink deeply when your turn comes, feeling the warm liquid flow down your throat, like liquid life itself. Between water sources, You have learned to read the landscape for signs of hidden moisture. Certain types of rock formations hold dew longer than others. The deep shade beneath particular arrangements of boulders sometimes preserves small puddles that escape the sun's immediate attention. You investigate every possibility with the thoroughness of a creature for whom water has become more precious than food. The vegetation tells its own story of drought stress. Thorny shrubs that once grew thick with small leaves now present only naked branches to the sky. The few plants that retain any green growth have retreated into the most protected microclimates, clustering around rock formations that provide both shade and what little moisture can be found. Even the hardy succulents that normally thrive in dry conditions show signs of severe stress, their thick leaves shriveled and yellow. Your hunting strategy has adapted to the new reality of drought. Rather than stalking active prey across open ground, you have learned to position yourself near the remaining shade sources where exhausted animals come to escape the heat. A grove of thorny trees near the base of the limestone cliffs provides the only substantial shade for miles, and you have discovered that deer and wild pigs will risk almost anything for access to this refuge. The successful hunts of the drought season require patience that stretches across days rather than hours. You select a position that provides both access to shade and a clear view of animal approach routes, then settle into the stone, still waiting that characterizes your species at its most efficient. Moving only to follow the small patches of shade as the sun tracks across the sky, you become part of the landscape itself, invisible until the moment of striking. Your body has adapted to the harsh conditions with the efficiency of millions of years of evolution. Your metabolism has slowed to conserve energy, and you can now go 2 weeks between substantial meals without significant deterioration. Your skin has thickened slightly to reduce water loss, and you instinctively seek positions that minimize your exposure to direct sunlight, even when basking is necessary for temperature regulation. The nights bring their own form of mercy. As the sun disappears behind the western ridges, the temperature drops to merely uncomfortable rather than life-threatening. These are the hours when you allow yourself to travel longer distances, checking water sources and hunting grounds under cover of darkness. The cool air feels like a blessing against your scales, and sometimes you imagine you can smell moisture in the breeze, even when the sky remains cloudlessly clear. In the limestone cave that has become your primary refuge, you settle into the deepest chamber as the afternoon heat reaches its peak. The rock around you has been carved smooth by ancient water, and you can almost feel the presence of the long-vanished streams that created this sanctuary. Here, in the cool darkness, you enter a state that is neither sleep nor full wakefulness, conserving energy while remaining alert to any change in conditions that might signal opportunity or danger. The drought will end eventually. Your genetic memory carries the certainty of cycles, wet seasons following dry, abundance eventually replacing scarcity. But until that time comes, you have become a master of endurance, a creature perfectly adapted to squeeze life from a landscape that seems determined to provide none. Every day survived is a victory. Every successful drink from a shrinking pool is a triumph against the pitiless mathematics of survival. In a world where water has become more precious than blood, saltwater swim, the decision to enter the ocean does not come easily. For 3 days, you have positioned yourself on the rocky headland that overlooks the channel separating your island from the smaller islet visible across a mile of dark water. The drought has reduced your home territory to a collection of barely adequate resources, while your sensitive nose carries tantalizing scents from across the water, the smell of seabird colonies, the musk of animals that might provide easier hunting than the increasingly scarce prey on your own island. The morning you finally commit to the crossing arrives with unusual cloud cover that promises to keep the sun's heat from becoming lethal during the extended exposure of an ocean swim. You make your way down the steep cliff face with careful deliberation, claws finding purchase on rock that crumbles slightly under your weight. The sound of waves grows stronger as you descend, salt spray occasionally misting across your scales with the alien sensation of moisture that carries no promise of drinking water. At the water's edge, you pause for long minutes, tongue flicking out to taste the salt-heavy air. The ocean is a foreign element to a creature designed for terrestrial dominance, but it is not entirely unknown. Your species has island-hopped across this archipelago for thousands of years, and swimming ability runs in your genetic code like a half-remembered dream. Your ancestors crossed far greater distances than the channel that stretches before you now. The first contact with seawater sends a shock through your nervous system. The liquid is warm from the tropical sun, but its salinity creates sensations unlike any freshwater experience. You wade forward slowly, feeling the sand and coral fragments shift beneath your claws as the water rises past your belly. Each step takes you deeper into an environment where your usual advantages of size and strength become secondary to more fundamental concerns of buoyancy and navigation. When the water reaches your chest, you make the transition from walking to swimming with surprising grace. Your powerful legs, designed for explosive hunting strikes on land, prove equally effective as swimming appendages. Your tail, that devastating weapon capable of breaking bones, becomes a rudder and propulsion system that drives you forward through the waves with steady, rhythmic strokes. Your body settles into the water with the efficiency of evolutionary engineering. Despite your substantial weight on land, you discover that you float naturally in the buoyant salt water, your body fat and internal air spaces combining to keep you stable at the surface. Your nostrils seal automatically when waves wash over your head, an adaptation that allows you to breathe normally even when the ocean occasionally claims temporary possession of your airways. The swimming technique that emerges feels both foreign and familiar. Your legs work in alternating patterns, powerful strokes that pull you through the water while your tail provides steering and additional propulsion. You ride low in the water, only your head and the ridge of your back visible above the surface, creating the illusion of a floating log that would fool casual observers from a distance. This camouflage is instinctive, a survival mechanism that serves you well, even in the open ocean. The current becomes a living force that you must read and negotiate. What appeared from shore to be a simple stretch of water reveals itself as a complex system of flows and counterflows, invisible rivers within the sea that can either assist or oppose your progress. You feel the pull of a strong current that runs parallel to the shore, and you angle your swimming to use its energy rather than fight against it. The ocean has its own intelligence, and survival requires learning to work with its patterns rather than imposing your will upon it. Halfway across the channel, you encounter your first real test of ocean navigation. A series of larger waves, perhaps stirred up by distant weather systems, begins to buffet your swimming form. Each wave lifts you several feet before dropping you into the trough that follows, creating a roller coaster effect that would disorient creatures less adapted to maintaining spatial awareness. You adjust your breathing rhythm to match the wave pattern, taking deeper breaths on the crests and conserving air in the troughs. The salt water carries information that your terrestrial experience cannot interpret. Scents of deep ocean fish, seaweed forests growing far below your swimming path, and the chemical signatures of currents that have traveled thousands of miles all flood your sensitive olfactory system. You filter through this oceanic babble for the information that matters, most the growing scent of your destination island. Now, close enough that individual smells of vegetation and animal life begin to reach you. Your swimming muscles, working harder than they have ever worked on land, begin to burn with the familiar ache of extended exertion. But your stamina, built through years of patient hunting and territorial patrol, proves equal to the demands of ocean crossing. You maintain a steady rhythm, each stroke powerful but economical, designed to carry you the full distance rather than provide explosive speed over short distances. Marine life begins to notice your passage through their domain. Small fish dart away from your swimming form, their silver sides flashing in the filtered sunlight that penetrates the ocean surface. You glimpse larger shadows moving in the deeper water below, perhaps sharks or rays investigating this unusual visitor to their realm. But you pose no threat to the ocean's inhabitants, and they seem to recognize your peaceful passage as temporary intrusion rather than invasion. The water beneath you deepens to blue-black obscurity, and you resist the instinctive unease that comes from swimming above unknown depths. Your focus remains fixed on the approaching shoreline, now close enough to reveal individual rocks and the white foam of waves breaking against coral. The scent of land grows stronger, the musty smell of seabird guano, the green odors of vegetation, and underneath it all, the possibility of freshwater sources that could ease the drought conditions driving your desperate migration. As you near the destination island, the seafloor begins to rise again, and patches of coral become visible through the clear water. You navigate carefully around these underwater obstacles, your swimming path weaving between formations that could scrape your scales if approached carelessly. The coral gardens below teem with tropical fish, whose bright colors create a living kaleidoscope beneath your swimming form. The final approach to shore requires careful timing to avoid being dashed against the rocks by incoming waves. You wait just beyond the surf line, reading the pattern of the swells and identifying the moment when you can ride a wave toward shore rather than fight against it. When the right wave arrives, you use its energy to carry you into the shallows, your powerful legs finding purchase on sand and rock as you transition back from swimmer to terrestrial predator. Emerging from the ocean, you feel the weight of gravity reassert itself as water streams from your scales. The salt residue will need to be cleaned from your skin, but for now you are simply grateful to feel solid ground beneath your claws again. The crossing has taken nearly 2 hours of steady swimming, a feat that few land predators could match, but one that sits comfortably within the capabilities of your ancient and adaptable species. You pause on the new beach to taste the air of this unfamiliar territory. The scents that drew you across the channel are stronger now, seabird colonies nesting on nearby cliffs, small mammals that might provide easier hunting than the drought-stressed prey of your home island. Most promising of all, you detect the mineral smell of fresh water somewhere inland, springs or streams that could provide the resource most precious in these dry times. The ocean crossing has opened new possibilities for survival, but it has also reminded you of the fundamental adaptability that has allowed your species to thrive across this scattered archipelago. You are equally at home stalking prey through thorny scrubland or swimming across ocean channels, a predator whose versatility matches the diverse challenges of island life. The salt water still drips from your scales as you begin your exploration of this new hunting ground, confident that the risks of the crossing will prove justified by the opportunities that await. Nest raids. The moon hangs like a pale eye above the coastal dunes as you begin your nocturnal prowl. Tonight, the silvery light illuminates a landscape transformed by opportunity. It is nesting season, and the beaches and cliff tops of your new island territory have become a banquet hall of vulnerable protein. The air carries the sharp tang of salt spray, mixed with the musky scents of countless seabirds roosting on the rocky ledges above, their presence marking locations where eggs lie unguarded in simple scrapes and shallow nests. Your movement across the sand is ghost quiet despite your substantial size. Each footstep places itself with deliberate care, your claws finding silent purchase on the loose surface that would betray a clumsier predator with telltale scraping sounds. The night hunting skills that served you well on your home island prove even more valuable here, where prey species have evolved without constant pressure from large terrestrial predators like yourself. Their vigilance focuses on aerial threats, the hawks and eagles that might take eggs or chicks during daylight hours, leaving them poorly prepared for the patient stalking approach of a ground-based nightmare. The first opportunity presents itself near the high tide line, where a sea turtle has hauled herself ashore to fulfill the ancient imperative of reproduction. She is a magnificent creature, perhaps 4 feet from head to tail, her dark carapace scarred by decades of oceanic survival. But tonight she is vulnerable in a way that the ocean never allows, committed to the slow, laborious process of excavating a nest chamber in the soft sand above the reach of normal tides. You settle into observation mode, becoming motionless as carved stone while she works. Her powerful flippers scoop away sand with methodical precision, creating a bottle-shaped cavity that will cradle the next generation of her species. The excavation takes nearly an hour, and you wait through every minute with the endless patience that makes you such an effective predator. Rush this moment, and you risk startling her back to the sea before the eggs are deposited. Wait for completion, and you will harvest a cache of nutrition that could sustain you for days. When she finally begins the egg-laying process, you edge closer with movements so gradual they would be invisible to any watcher. Her attention has turned completely inward, focused on the delicate work of positioning each leathery egg in the nest chamber. Soft grunts of effort escape her as she deposits clutch after clutch, perhaps 80 eggs in total, each one a concentrated packet of fats and proteins designed to fuel a turtle's development from embryo to hatchling. The moment arrives when she begins covering the eggs with sand, her rear flippers working to disguise the nest location from other predators. This is when her attention is most completely absorbed, when she commits herself to concealing her reproductive investment rather than watching for threats. You move with liquid precision, covering the 15 feet between your hiding spot and her position in seconds that feel like slow-motion inevitability. Your presence announces itself only when you are close enough to touch her shell. She startles with surprising violence for such a large creature, flippers throwing sand in desperate clouds as she attempts to pivot toward the ocean. But she is far from the water's edge, and her terrestrial movement is agonizingly slow compared to your own swift grace. You position yourself between her and escape. Not to attack her, she is far too large and well-armored to be practical prey, but to ensure she abandons the nest site rather than attempting to defend it. Her retreat is a chaos of displaced sand and panicked flipper strokes. She drags herself toward the surf line with the desperate energy of a creature suddenly aware of its vulnerability, leaving deep tracks in the sand that will be erased by tomorrow's tide. You watch her tumble into the waves and disappear beneath the surface, returning to the element where she reigns supreme, before turning your attention to the treasure she has left behind. The nest appears as nothing more than a slight depression in the sand, perfectly camouflaged to human eyes, but radiating scent information that your sensitive nose reads like a detailed map. You begin excavating with careful precision, your claws far more delicate than their size would suggest. Each scrape reveals more of the chamber, and soon the first eggs appear like pale moons in the moonlit sand. Sea turtle eggs possess a texture unlike anything else in your dietary experience. The shells yield to gentle pressure from your teeth, releasing contents that flood your mouth with rich, creamy nutrition. The taste is intensely oceanic, concentrated minerals and fats that speak of long migrations through deep waters and feeding grounds thousands of miles from this small island. Each egg represents months of the female turtle's investment, gathered nutrients that she has converted into the next generation's starting capital. You consume perhaps 20 eggs before the richness begins to overwhelm your system. This is food so concentrated that moderation becomes necessary. Too much too quickly could make you sluggish when speed might mean survival. The remaining eggs you cache carefully. In a secondary depression, you excavate nearby, covering them with sand that will keep them cool and hidden until tomorrow night's feeding. Moving inland from the turtle nesting beach, you discover that the low scrubland behind the dunes hosts an entirely different type of nesting opportunity. Seabirds, gulls, terns, and shearwater shave established a loosely organized colony in the protection of thorny shrubs that provide some concealment from aerial predators. Their nests are simple affairs, mere scrapes in the earth lined with whatever vegetation they could gather. But each contains 1 to 3 eggs that represent easily accessible protein. Your approach to the bird colony requires different tactics than the turtle nest raid. These creatures can take to the air instantly when threatened, and their alarm calls could wake the entire colony if you trigger a mass panic. Instead, you employ the hunting technique that has served your species for millions of years. You become part of the landscape itself, moving so slowly and deliberately that your presence registers as natural phenomenon rather than predatory threat. The first nest you investigate belongs to a pair of herring gulls who have chosen a depression beneath a particularly dense shrub. 3 mottled eggs rest in the simple bowl, each one warm with the promise of life. The parent birds roost nearby, heads tucked beneath wings in the vulnerable posture of sleep. Your tongue flicks out to taste their scent, confirming that they remain unaware of your presence, even though you now stand within striking distance of their reproductive investment. The eggs crack between your teeth with tiny popping sounds that seem impossibly loud in the night quiet, but the sleeping birds do not stir. Gull eggs carry flavors of the sea concentrated into shells, no larger than chicken egg salt and fish, and the wild freedom of creatures that spend their lives riding ocean winds. 3 eggs disappear in as many seconds, leaving only the empty nest scrape to mark what was once a family's future. You work your way systematically through the colony, taking eggs from perhaps a dozen nests, while leaving many others untouched. This is not mindless destruction, but calculated harvest-taking enough to feed yourself while leaving sufficient breeding success to ensure that the colony will return next season. Your predation becomes part of the natural selection pressure that will ultimately strengthen the species you feed upon. The night's hunting concludes at a cliff face where shearwaters nest in burrows they have excavated in the soft soil. These birds spend most of their lives far out at sea, returning to land only to breed in colonies that can contain thousands of pairs. Their burrows riddle the cliff top like some underground city, each tunnel leading to a nesting chamber where single eggs incubate in the darkness. Accessing shearwater eggs requires a different approach entirely. Your claws, designed for tearing flesh and gaining purchase on rocky surfaces, prove equally effective at excavating the nesting burrows. You dig carefully, following the scent trails that lead to occupied chambers, your sensitive nose distinguishing between active nests and abandoned holes. When you break through into a nesting chamber, you often find not just an egg but an adult bird sitting in stunned surprise at your intrusion. The shearwaters that encounter you in their burrows react with the frantic energy of creatures suddenly confronted by their worst nightmare. Wings beat against the confined space of their tunnels as they struggle to escape through passages barely wide enough for their bodies. Most manage to flee, erupting from their burrows like feathered missiles launched toward the safety of the open ocean. A few become so disoriented in their panic that they present themselves as additional protein to supplement your egg harvest. As dawn approaches and the eastern horizon begins to pale with the promise of sunrise, you retreat from the nesting areas with your belly full of concentrated nutrition. The night's work has yielded perhaps the equivalent of a full meal from a large mammal, but obtained with far less energy expenditure than would be required for traditional hunting. This is opportunistic feeding at its most efficient, exploiting the seasonal abundance that makes island life sustainable, even during the harsh months of drought and scarcity. The eggs you have consumed will fuel your body through the coming days, providing not just calories but the specific nutrients required for maintaining your massive frame during periods of reduced hunting activity. Protein for muscle maintenance, fats for energy storage, and minerals that will be incorporated into your scales and bones as you continue to grow throughout your extended lifespan. You settle into the shade of a rocky overhang as the sun begins its daily climb into what promises to be another cloudless sky. Your stomach works steadily to process the night's bounty, while your mind files away the locations of productive nesting sites for future reference. This island may have seemed foreign when you first swam across the channel from your drought-stricken home territory, but already it is becoming familiar grounder, new kingdom mapped in terms of opportunity and resource. waiting to be claimed by a predator wise enough to adapt to its seasonal rhythms. Lair in mangroves. Evening arrives like a curtain falling across the tropical landscape, and you feel the familiar pull towards shelter that signals the end of another day's hunting and territory patrol. The setting sun paints the western sky in shades of orange and gold, while the first stars begin their nightly emergence in the darkening east. This is the hour when the island's rhythm shifts from the harsh business of survival under the blazing sun to the gentler mysteries of night, and you seek the sanctuary that has become your favorite refuge in this new territory. The mangrove swamp lies in a protected bay on the island's eastern shore, where freshwater streams meet the salt tide in a marriage that creates one of the world's most productive ecosystems. Here, where land and sea blur into something entirely unique, you have discovered a resting place that satisfies every requirement your ancient instincts demand of a proper lair. The location provides security, access to water, abundant prey, and the kind of environmental complexity that has sheltered your species through millions of years of evolutionary adaptation. Your approach to the mangroves follows a well-worn path that your repeated passages have begun to carve into the landscape. Through open scrubland dotted with thorny shrubs, down a gentle slope where the soil grows increasingly dark and moist, until finally you reach the edge of the swamp, where the distinctive smell of brackish water and decomposing vegetation announces your arrival at this boundary between worlds. The mangrove trees themselves are evolutionary marvels that inspire something approaching respect in your predatory mind. These plants have solved the fundamental problem of living in salt water, their specialized root systems filtering out the minerals that would kill ordinary vegetation, while their prop roots create a vast network of supports that can withstand the daily assault of tides and storms. Some of these trees have stood here for decades, their twisted trunks and spreading canopies bearing witness to countless cycles of wet season and dry, abundance and scarcity. Your chosen resting spot lies deep within this maze of roots and branches, accessible only through channels that wind between the trees like liquid highways. The route requires careful navigation, even for a creature of your swimming ability, as the prop roots create underwater obstacles that could trap an unwary traveler. But you have learned the pathways through repeated exploration, and now you move through the mangrove channels with the confidence of familiarity. The water here tastes different from the pure salt of the ocean or the mineral clarity of freshwater streams. It carries the complex chemistry of life in transition salt mixed with fresh, organic compounds leached from decomposing leaves, and the faint metallic tang of nutrients cycling through the ecosystem. You drink sparingly, not from thirst but from the instinctive need to sample your environment, gathering chemical information that helps you understand the health and changes in your territory. Deep within the swamp, you reach the specific cluster of mangrove trees that forms your preferred sleeping chamber. The prop roots here have grown into a natural cathedral, their intertwining branches creating spaces large enough to accommodate your substantial frame while providing security from above and concealment from all sides. The largest of these spaces has become your regular resting spot, a bowl-shaped depression between massive roots, where you can settle with your back protected and clear sightlines toward all potential approach routes. The floor of your mangrove lair consists of soft mud mixed with generations of fallen leaves in various stages of decomposition. This organic mattress molds itself to your body as you settle into position, providing cushioning that remains surprisingly comfortable despite its humble origins. The constant moisture keeps the surface cool even during the hottest days, and the chemical processes of decay generate a subtle warmth that proves welcome during the cooler nights. As you arrange yourself for the evening's rest, the mangrove swamp comes alive around you with the symphony of tropical night sounds. Insects begin their chirping chorus almost immediately after sunset, a wall of sound so constant that it becomes like silence. It's noticed only when it stops. Crickets and tree frogs add their voices to the mix, creating layers of natural music that speak of abundance and thriving ecosystems. From somewhere deeper in the swamp comes the hollow boom of a night heron calling to its mate, the sound echoing off the water and root systems with haunting resonance. These birds have learned to hunt in the shallow channels between the mangroves, wading through water that barely covers their legs while searching for small fish and crustaceans. They pose no threat to you, but their presence indicates the health of the aquatic food web that makes this ecosystem so productive. The humidity of the mangrove environment wraps around your massive frame like a living thing, thick air that carries moisture deep into your lungs with every breath. This is moisture you can feel on your scales, condensing from the saturated atmosphere to provide tiny supplements to your water intake. During the drought season that drove you from your original territory, you never imagined that air itself could carry such liquid abundance. Your lungs work steadily to process this humid atmosphere, their efficient design extracting oxygen while managing the moisture load that would overwhelm less adapted respiratory systems. The breathing rhythm that emerges is slower and deeper than your terrestrial pattern, accommodating both the thick air and the relaxed metabolic demands of rest and digestion. Each breath becomes a meditation on survival, a reminder of the physiological adaptations that allow you to thrive in environments from desert scrubland to oceanic swimming to this swampy sanctuary. Water laps gently against the prop roots near your resting place, the sound marking the eternal rhythm of tides that rise and fall according to lunar schedules, far older than terrestrial life. The tide is incoming now. You can tell from the subtle changes in water level and the direction of current flow through the channels. Within a few hours, the water level will rise by several feet, transforming the geography of your refuge in ways both subtle and profound. But you are safe from tidal flooding in your chosen spot, positioned well above the high water mark in a chamber that has been sculpted by countless previous flood cycles. The prop roots around you show the staining that marks maximum water levels, and your resting place sits comfortably above those marks. You can sleep here in complete security, knowing that the tide will rise and fall without disturbing your rest. The sounds of the swamp continue to evolve as full darkness settles over the landscape. Somewhere in the distance, a fish jumps with a splash that echoes through the root channels, perhaps pursued by one of the small sharks that venture into the mangroves during high tide. Fruit bats begin their nightly emergence from roosts hidden in the canopy above, their leathery wings creating brief shadows against the stars as they disperse to feeding grounds throughout the island. Your mind begins the gradual descent towards sleep, but even in rest you remain connected to the pulse of life that surrounds your lair. This is Predator, sleep never complete unconsciousness, but rather a state of reduced activity that maintains awareness of environmental changes that might signal opportunity or danger. Your hearing remains acute enough to distinguish between the normal sounds of swamp life and the subtle alterations that might indicate the presence of prey or competing predators. In the deepest part of the night, when the tide reaches its peak and the mangrove channels run full and dark beneath the canopy, your dreaming mind touches something deeper than individual memory. The genetic heritage of your species carries information gathered across millions of years of survival in tropical environments, and in sleep, this ancient knowledge surfaces like bubbles rising through dark water. You dream of ancestors who hunted these same swamps when the world was younger and the climate different, of great lizards who learned to navigate between salt water and fresh, who discovered that survival often depends on finding the boundary places where different worlds meet and merge. The mangroves represent such a boundary, neither fully terrestrial nor completely aquatic, but something new created by the marriage of opposites. The night passes in this suspended state between wakefulness and dreams, your massive form rising and falling with the slow rhythm of relaxed breathing while the swamp maintains its constant chorus of life. When dawn finally begins to lighten the eastern sky, filtering through the mangrove canopy in shafts of gold and green, you will rouse yourself gradually and begin another day of exploration and hunting in your island territory. But for now, wrapped in humidity and darkness, cradled by roots that have grown strong through decades of storms and tides. You rest in the perfect security of a lair that satisfies every instinctive requirement of your ancient and adaptable species. The mangroves keep their secrets and shelter their own, and you have become part of their mystery. Blood and venom. The water buffalo stands knee-deep in the muddy shallows of the island's largest remaining pond, and you can smell the sickness that radiates from her massive frame, even from your position 50 yards upwind. She is a magnificent creature, despite her affliction perhaps 800 pounds of muscle and bone, her dark hide scarred by decades of survival in this harsh landscape. But today she moves with the careful deliberation of an animal fighting an internal battle, and your predatory instincts recognize opportunity in her obvious distress. 3 days ago, you delivered the bite that began this slow drama of death and patience. The attack came at dawn, when she had waded into the pond to drink, her attention focused on the precious water rather than scanning for threats. Your approach through the reed beds had been flawless, ghost-silent stalk that positioned you within striking distance before she registered your presence. The bite itself lasted only seconds, your powerful jaws clamping down on her left hind leg just above the hock, teeth penetrating deep into muscle before she could react. She had fought magnificently, as water buffalo do when cornered. Her massive head swung toward you with bone-crushing force, horns that could disembowel a careless predator whistling through the air inches from your skull. But you had released your grip immediately after delivering the bite, dancing backward with surprising agility for a creature of your size, avoiding her counterattack while your venom began its inexorable work. The wound itself was not particularly severe, a series of punctures that would normally heal within weeks. But your saliva carries chemical weapons evolved over millions of years to turn minor injuries into death sentences. The cocktail of anticoagulants, tissue necrosis agents, and septic bacteria that now courses through her bloodstream represents one of nature's most sophisticated biochemical warfare systems, designed to ensure that prey animals who escape the initial attack will not escape the patient hunter who inflicted it. Now, watching her from the concealment of a fallen log, you observe the progression of symptoms with the clinical interest of a predator who understands exactly what forces you have set in motion. Her movements have become labored, each step clearly causing pain as the venom-enhanced infection spreads through her leg. The wound site has swollen to twice its normal size, the tissue around your bite marks taking on the angry red coloration that indicates advancing sepsis. Her behavior tells the story of an immune system losing a war it cannot win. She spends long periods standing motionless in the muddy water, conserving energy, while her body attempts to fight off the advancing infection. When she does move, it is with obvious reluctance, favoring the injured leg in a way that creates an increasingly pronounced limp. The other members of her small herd have begun to avoid her, instinctively recognizing the scent of approaching death. You have been following her for 72 hours now, maintaining a careful distance that allows observation without triggering panic. This is hunting at its most patient and methodical, not the explosive violence of an ambush predator, but the relentless persistence of a creature that has learned to make time itself a weapon. Your venom has already won this battle. Now you simply wait for biology to complete the process that your bite initiated. The tracking itself has become a masterclass in reading sign and interpreting behavior. Her hoofprints in the soft earth around water sources tell detailed stories of her deteriorating condition. The stride length shortens day by day as the infection advances. The depth of the impressions changes as she shifts more weight to her uninjured legs. Small drops of blood and pus begin to appear along her trail, marking her passage with the chemical signature of systemic failure. Her feeding behavior provides another window into the progression of your venom's effects. Water buffalo are normally voracious grazers, spending most of their waking hours cropping grass and browse with methodical efficiency. But as the septic infection advances, her appetite diminishes noticeably. She spends less time with her head down, more time scanning the landscape with the nervous alertness of an animal that recognizes its own vulnerability. The fourth day brings visible signs of systemic toxicity. Her coat, normally glossy black with the sheen of good health, has taken on a dull, lifeless appearance. Her eyes, once bright and alert, now carry the clouded look of an animal whose body is redirecting all available energy toward fighting the advancing infection. When she moves now, it is with the careful deliberation of a creature conserving its dwindling reserves of strength. You taste the air constantly during these tracking days, your forked tongue sampling the chemical information that her failing body broadcasts into the environment. The scent of infection grows stronger with each passing hour, the sweet, sick smell of necrotic tissue, the sharp tang of fever, and underneath it all, the unmistakable odor of approaching death that triggers deep satisfaction in your predatory brain. The other wildlife of the island has begun to take notice of the developing situation. Vultures appear in increasing numbers, riding the thermal currents high above, while keeping the buffalo in sight. These scavengers possess an almost supernatural ability to detect approaching death, and their gathering presence confirms what your nose and eyes have already told you. The end is approaching. On the fifth day, she stops moving entirely, except to shift position occasionally, in search of whatever comfort she can find. The infection has advanced to the point where movement itself has become an ordeal that her weakened body can barely manage. She has taken refuge in a grove of thorny trees near the pond's edge, seeking shade that her fever-racked system desperately needs. Her breathing has become labored, each inhalation requiring visible effort as her body struggles to maintain basic functions. The wound on her leg now seeps continuously, creating a constant stream of fluid that attracts clouds of flies. These insects, drawn by the scent of decay, have become living markers of her approaching death, their presence growing denser with each passing hour. You position yourself within 30 yards of her resting place, close enough to move quickly when the moment arrives, but far enough to avoid causing panic that might drive her to waste her remaining strength in futile flight. From this distance, you can observe every detail of her decline, the way her head droops lower with each hour, the increasing frequency of her labored breathing, the growing stillness that indicates a body conserving its last reserves of energy. The final collapse comes during the afternoon of the sixth day. You watch her legs tremble with the effort of supporting her massive frame. See the moment when her strength finally fails completely. She settles to the ground with surprising gentleness for such a large animal, her body folding into the earth as if she has finally accepted the inevitable outcome of your patient pursuit. Even now, she is not quite finished. Her massive chest continues to rise and fall with irregular breathing, and her eyes still track movement when you begin your cautious approach. But the fight has gone out of her. Spark of defiance that might once have driven her to one last desperate charge has been extinguished by days of systemic poisoning and exhaustion. You reach her position and settle down to wait for the final moments. This is not cruelty, but efficiency. Moving too quickly now could still trigger a defensive response that might injure you even in her weakened state. Better to wait for complete stillness before beginning the feeding process that will sustain you for weeks to come. Her death, when it finally arrives, is peaceful by the standards of the natural world. Her breathing simply grows more and more irregular until finally it stops altogether, her massive frame relaxing into the permanent stillness that marks the end of her suffering. The flies that have been waiting in ever-increasing numbers immediately intensify their activity, drawn by chemical changes that announce the transition from dying animal to available carrion. You approach the carcass with the satisfaction of a hunter whose patience has been rewarded with complete success. 800 pounds of meat now lies before you, enough food to sustain your massive frame through the remainder of the dry season and well into the next period of abundance. Your venom has done its work with the precision of millions of years of evolutionary refinement, transforming what could have been a dangerous direct confrontation into a patient siege that favored your strengths while exploiting your prey's weaknesses. The first bite you take is from the original wound site, tasting your own venom mixed with the rich blood and muscle of your victim. This is the flavor of successful predation death transformed into life, patience, rewarded with sustenance, the ancient contract between hunter and hunted fulfilled once again. The meat is tender from the infection that weakened her, making feeding easier than it would have been from a healthy animal killed by more violent means. As you begin the leisurely process of consumption, the flies hum their approval around the feast site. This is the sound of success in the predatory world, the background music that accompanies every successful hunt, the acoustic signature of death recycled into life through the endless cycles that have sustained your species across geological ages. Shades of the forest edge. The boundary between worlds runs invisible through this part of the island, marked not by walls or fences, but by scent and sound, and the subtle shift in how shadows fall. Here, where the dry forest meets the cultivated edges of human settlement, you move with different calculations running through your ancient brain. Every step requires the kind of awareness that has kept your species alive for millions of years, but now sharpened against threats your ancestors never knew. The wind carries stories today. Rice cooking in metal pots sends its sweet, starchy perfume drifting through the acacia scrub, mixing with wood smoke and the sharper chemical tang of plastic burning. These are not the clean scents of carrion and earth that normally guide your movements. They speak of a different kind of life, one that operates by rhythms you don't understand, but have learned to respect through painful experience. Your massive body moves through the dappled light with surprising grace, each footfall placed with the deliberate care of something that weighs as much as 3 men. But learned long ago that carelessness near human habitation brings swift retribution. The memory sits deep in your muscles. The sharp crack of stones from slingshots, the acrid burn of fireworks exploding too close to your scales, the shouting voices that always seem to rise in pitch when humans catch sight of your yellow eyes, watching them from the tree line. Distance becomes a negotiation here. Too far from the forest edge, and you lose the security of familiar territory, the known paths back to caves and hollow logs where a dragon can rest without watching every approach. Too close to the fields and gardens, and you risk encountering the upright silhouettes that trigger something primal and electric in your nervous system. Not fear. Exactly, you are apex enough to fear very little, but a recognition of unpredictability that makes your tongue flick more frequently, testing the air for the metallic taste that precedes human aggression. The engine thrum reaches you before you see the motorbike, a mechanical heartbeat that has no natural analog, but has become as much a part of this borderlands soundscape as bird calls or insect drone. You freeze, letting your mottled hide blend with the bark patterns of a fallen tree, becoming landscape rather than predator. The sound grows closer, putters past on some invisible track beyond the vegetation, then fades toward the village. Only when silence returns do you resume your patient patrol. This is hunting ground, but hunting transformed by complexity. The deer and wild pigs still move through here, but their patterns have changed, shaped by the same human presence that alters your own behavior. They've learned to feed at dawn and dusk when the farmers sleep, to use the forest corridors that humans avoid, to drink from streams rather than wells. You've adapted too, timing your hunts to match their new rhythms, learning to read the landscape through their eyes as much as your own. A dog barks somewhere in the middle distance, that particular sequence of sounds that means alarm rather than play or territory marking. Your head swivels toward the sound, nostrils flaring. Dogs carry their own complications. Some flee at your scent, remembering genetic wisdom about large predators. Others, made bold by human proximity, will challenge even a dragon. You've faced down village dogs before, yellow teeth bared and hackles raised, both of you understanding that this confrontation serves no one's interests. Usually they back down once they process your size. Usually. The cooking rice smell intensifies as a breeze shifts. and with it comes the sound of voices, too distant to be threatening, but close enough to map. A woman's laugh, sharp and musical. A child's higher tones, asking some urgent question. The rhythmic thunk of an axe biting wood. These are the sounds of a species that has learned to remake the world around itself, to bend water and plant growth and even earth to its will. Your kind survives by adaptation, but humans survive by transformation. You remember when this forest edge held no boundary at all, when trees grew unbroken to the very shore, and the only clearings were those carved by storm or the death of ancient giants. The change has happened gradually enough that your long life contains the full arc of it, from wild island to something more complicated. Not worse, necessarily, but requiring constant recalibration of instincts that evolved for a simpler world. The afternoon light filters through leaves that rustle with small birds, wrens, and flowerpeckers that pay you no attention. To them, you're simply part of the landscape, another large rock or fallen log. But you know that beyond this screen of vegetation, other eyes might be watching with the kind of attention that calculates trajectory and range. A dragon learns quickly which silhouettes mean danger and which merely mean presence. As you settle into the patient stillness that is your greatest hunting tool, one last scent drifts past. The green smell of vegetables growing in neat rows, the faint sweetness of ripening fruit, the complex mixture of human cultivation. It's not entirely unpleasant. This evidence of the species that has learned to make the earth produce what it wants, rather than taking only what it offers. But it marks the edge of your world as surely as any cliff or shore, the place where ancient rules give way to newer ones you're still learning to navigate. Courtship rituals. The first rains of the wet season have awakened something electric in the air, a chemical symphony that speaks to parts of your brain older than thought itself. The scent drifts to you on the humid breeze. Female, receptive, ready for the ancient dance that your species has performed for millions of years. It carries undertones of musk and earth, and something indefinably magnetic that makes your massive body suddenly feel lighter, more purposeful. She's been marking territory for days now, leaving traces of her presence on rocks and fallen logs like a trail of invisible breadcrumbs. Your forked tongue tastes these messages in the air, processing information with an organ so sensitive it can detect a single molecule among billions. Location, health, readiness, all of it written in chemical language across the landscape. You've been following this trail with the patience of something that understands the value of timing, letting anticipation build like pressure before a storm. When you finally sight her, she's basking in a patch of afternoon sunlight that streams through the canopy, her scales gleaming like hammered bronze. 8 feet of perfectly evolved predator, she represents everything your genetic programming recognizes as desirable. Size that speaks of successful hunting, scars that tell of survival, the particular way she holds her massive head that signals confidence and strength. She knows you're watching, has known for some time, but continues her performance of studied indifference. The courtship begins with distance, with the slow ritual of approach that acknowledges the fundamental truth about your species. Even in romance, you are dealing with creatures capable of killing each other. You circle at what humans might consider a respectful distance, but which represents something more complex in dragon terms. Negotiation of space that allows both predators to assess without triggering the combat reflexes that lie so close to the surface. Your tongue works constantly now, sampling the air around her flanks as you move through this careful ballet. Each flick brings new information: her health, her history, the subtle chemical signatures that speak to genetic compatibility. She watches you with eyes like golden coins, turning her great head to track your movement but not yet engaging directly. This is evaluation, the serious business of determining whether this particular male represents worthy genes for the next generation. The circling tightens gradually, spirals of approach that might look almost comical to creatures that court with flowers and songs. But there's a profound grace in this movement, a recognition that beings this powerful must find ways to be gentle with each other. Your massive claws, capable of disemboweling a water buffalo, now place themselves with delicate precision. Your jaws, strong enough to crush bone, remain carefully closed. When the first physical contact comes, it's barely contact at all. The lightest brush of your snout against her neck scales, she doesn't flinch or snap, which you read as permission to continue. This is the moment when courtship becomes something more intimate, when the careful distance of evaluation gives way to the vulnerability of actual touch. Your great bulk moves with surprising tenderness as you begin the slow investigation of her presence. The nudges that follow carry the full weight of your body behind them, but delivered with the kind of restraint that speaks to millions of years of evolutionary fine-tuning. Too rough, and you trigger defensive responses that could turn courtship into combat. Too gentle, and you fail to demonstrate the strength that successful mating requires. The balance point exists in some ancient understanding that your bodies know even when your brain doesn't consciously calculate it. She begins to respond now, turning into your touch, rather than simply tolerating it, adding her own gentle pressure to this careful negotiation of space and intent. Her tongue flicks out to taste your scales, gathering her own information about this potential mate. You can sense her muscles relaxing slightly, the subtle shift from wariness to acceptance that marks a crucial transition in the ritual. The balletic tension builds between you now, a dance of approach and retreat that acknowledges both the attraction and the fundamental danger of what you're attempting. Two apex predators choosing to be vulnerable with each other requires a kind of trust that your species rarely extends to anything, even its own kind. Every movement must be telegraphed, every intention clear, because the penalty for misunderstanding is measured in claw marks and blood. Your massive tail sweeps in slow arcs behind you, not the aggressive display you'd show to a rival male, but something more like emphasis, the physical punctuation of your intent. She mirrors the movement with her own tail, and for a moment you're moving together in a rhythm that speaks to something deeper than conscious choice. This is genetic memory in action, the wisdom of countless generations distilled into movement and touch. The sunlight shifts through the canopy as afternoon progresses, painting both your scales in patterns of gold and shadow. The forest around you continues its business birds calling, insects humming, the distant splash of something entering water, but you exist now in a bubble of focused attention where only this moment matters. The careful courtship that began with chemical messages has become something immediate and electric. When she finally signals full acceptance, it comes not through any dramatic gesture, but through the simple act of positioning herself parallel to your bulk, close enough that you can feel the heat radiating from her sun-warmed scales. The message is clear. The evaluation is complete. The choice made. What follows will be the culmination of everything that evolution has taught your species about perpetuating itself in a world that shows no mercy to the weak or unprepared. Dragon battle. The challenger arrives with all the subtle grace of a landslide, his presence announcing itself through ground vibrations you feel in your belly scales before you see him. 9 feet of scarred muscle and territorial rage, he represents everything your hindbrain recognizes as direct threat to the reproductive opportunity you've spent days carefully cultivating. The female watches from her basking spot with the dispassionate interest of a creature who understands that the strongest genes win the right to continue, regardless of which male she might personally prefer. This is not the careful ballet of courtship, but something far older and more brutal. 2 apex predators with identical programming, mate or dominate, with no middle ground between them. Your massive body shifts into combat stance without conscious thought, tail sweeping wide for balance, claws finding purchase in the soft earth. The newcomer mirrors your posture, and suddenly the forest clearing becomes an arena where millions of years of evolution will decide which of you has earned the right to pass on genetic material. The circling begins again, but with entirely different energy now. Where courtship demanded delicacy and restraint, combat requires the kind of controlled violence that your species has perfected across geological ages. You're reading his movements for weaknesses, calculating angles of attack and defense, measuring the reach of his claws against your own. He's doing the same. Yellow eyes tracking every shift of your weight, every adjustment of your positioning. Size becomes crucial now in ways that courtship only hinted at. You're both large specimens, but he carries perhaps 50 pounds more bulk across his frame, muscle that translates directly into leverage and striking power. You counter with reach advantages and scars that tell of successful battles, the kind of experience that teaches precisely where and when to apply force for maximum effect. This is chess played by creatures whose mistakes are measured in blood and bone. The first contact comes without warning, both of you launching forward simultaneously as if triggered by some invisible signal. Bodies that can move with surprising speed when necessary collide with a sound like falling trees, scale against scale, claw against claw. You grapple for advantage while your brains calculate a dozen variables at once: footing, balance, the angle needed to bring your powerful tail into play. Then you're both rearing up on hind legs, transforming into living pillars of muscle and rage that tower above the forest floor. This is the classic dragon battle pose, as old as your species itself, designed to bring maximum body weight and claw reach into play while protecting vital organs. You lock claws like gladiators, each trying to force the other off balance, to create the opening that will allow for a decisive strike. The wrestling that follows operates on principles of physics and anatomy that your bodies understand intuitively. Leverage becomes everything. The precise angle needed to use his weight against him, the foot placement that will let you drive forward rather than simply absorb his attacks. Your tail sweeps in calculated arcs, not wild thrashing but targeted strikes designed to buckle his legs or throw him sideways. He's stronger, but you're more experienced, and the difference shows in how you distribute effort. Where he relies on brute force, you use technique, redirecting his attacks rather than meeting them head-on, letting his own momentum work against him. When his claws rake across your shoulder scales, you turn into the strike rather than away from it, getting inside his reach where your own claws can find soft belly scales. The sound of combat fills the clearing, the dull thud of scale against scale, the scrape of claws seeking purchase, the sharp exhalations that escape when a particularly solid blow connects. This is not the screaming violence of mammals, but something more controlled, more calculated. Two perfect predators, testing each other's limits with the kind of precision that only comes from millions of years of evolutionary refinement. You feel his strength beginning to tell as the battle progresses, the gradual shift in leverage that speaks of superior mass finally asserting itself. Your breathing becomes more labored, your movements slightly slower to respond. The mathematics of combat are working against you, physics and biology conspiring to favor the larger male. But you're not finished yet, not while experience and cunning still offer paths to victory. A particularly violent exchange sends both of you crashing back to earth, claws still locked, bodies rolling through leaf litter and small saplings with bone-jarring impact. You end up beneath him for a terrifying moment, his full weight pressing down while his jaws snap inches from your throat. This is the position that usually ends dragon battles, the moment when submission becomes the only alternative to serious injury. But your tail finds his ribs with a strike that lifts his bulk just enough to create escape room. You twist with a desperate strength that only comes when survival hangs in the balance, rolling away from those snapping jaws and regaining your feet with reflexes honed by a lifetime of dangerous encounters. The battle could continue, but something in the mathematics has shifted, some calculation of cost versus benefit that your ancient brain performs without conscious input. He doesn't pursue as you back away, breathing hard, scales torn in several places but nothing that won't heal. Both of you understand what has been established here. He is the stronger male, the one whose genes will continue through the next generation. The defeat stings in the way that all defeats sting, but it's not the crushing humiliation that humans might feel. This is simply the way your species determines breeding rights, as natural and necessary as breathing. The female watches as you retreat to a respectful distance, her golden eyes registering the outcome without apparent emotion. She will mate with the victor because he has proven himself the superior specimen, not through any personal preference, but through the kind of logic that has kept dragons alive since the age of giant reptiles. Your time will come again, perhaps next season, perhaps with a different female. For now, you carry your wounds into the forest and begin the patient work of healing. The mating. What follows happens with an intensity that strips away everything except the most fundamental biological imperative. The victor approaches the female with the confidence of established dominance, but even now the dance requires delicacy. She is no conquered territory, but a willing participant whose cooperation will determine whether this encounter produces the next generation of dragons. Her acceptance, demonstrated through subtle positioning and the absence of defensive postures, transforms the clearing into something sacred in its primal purpose. The coupling begins amid the scattered leaf litter, where moments before violence had churned the earth. Nature shows no sentimentality about location. What matters is the convergence of genetics and opportunity, the precise moment when two perfect predators choose to create something new together. Her massive form settles into receptive positioning, while he approaches with movements that speak to instincts older than continents. Their claws lock not in combat now, but in the desperate grip of creatures whose armor rarely allows for true vulnerability. The sound that escapes from both throats is neither roar nor hiss, but something lower, more primal vibration that seems to resonate in your chest, even from your distant vantage point. This is intimacy for beings whose very touch can kill, tenderness expressed through the careful control of lethal force. The physical mechanics unfold with surprising gentleness for creatures whose courtship ended in combat. His massive weight settles over her with the careful distribution of something that understands the difference between domination and partnership. Her tail curves to accommodate him, while his claws find purchase in the earth rather than her scales. Even apex predators must learn to be gentle when the future of their species depends on successful mating. Low hisses punctuate the encounter, communication in the most basic language your kind possesses. Not aggression, but something closer to coordination, the vocal equivalent of touch that helps two solitary creatures navigate this brief moment of necessary cooperation. The sounds carry an urgency that speaks to biological windows, to the narrow time frames that determine whether this season will produce offspring. You watch from your position of enforced exile, processing this scene through layers of genetic programming and personal memory. The mating of dragons represents something both completely familiar and endlessly fascinating, the moment when individual survival gives way to species continuation. Part of you catalogues the technical aspects: position, duration, the subtle signs that indicate successful copulation. Another part simply observes the rare sight of your kind choosing vulnerability over self-protection. The encounter builds to its climax with increasing intensity, both participants lost now in the biological imperatives that drive all life toward reproduction. Her claws dig furrows in the earth as his movements become more urgent, more focused. This is evolution in action, the selection of traits that have allowed dragons to survive mass extinctions and ice ages and the rise of mammals. Strength, cunning, adaptability all distilled into this moment of genetic transfer. When completion comes, it arrives with a shared vocalization that echoes through the forest like thunder, a sound that speaks to satisfaction on levels deeper than consciousness. The successful mating represents victory not just for these two individuals, but for the continuation of everything that makes dragons unique in the world's catalogue of predators. Their offspring will carry forward the accumulated wisdom of millions of years of evolution. The aftermath unfolds with the kind of practical detachment that characterizes most reptilian behavior. No lingering embraces or extended contact, such things serve no evolutionary purpose and waste energy better conserved for the challenges ahead. They separate with the same careful attention to claw placement that marked their initial approach, returning to individual space with the satisfaction of biological duty fulfilled. She will find a nesting site in the coming weeks, some hidden place where rotting vegetation provides the precise temperature and humidity needed for proper egg development. He will return to his own territory, his genetic investment complete. Both understand without need for conscious thought that their paths may never cross again, except in the DNA of the offspring this encounter will produce. The clearing settles back into ordinary forest rhythm as both dragons move away in different directions. Birds return to call from branches that had fallen silent during the mating. Insects resume their buzzing. The leaf litter that bore witness to creation slowly obscures the evidence with new layers of falling debris. Only the scent traces remain, invisible markers that will fade over days and weeks until no sign remains of this crucial moment in the continuation of the dragon lineage. Seasonal storms. The pressure drop hits your sensitive inner ear first, a sensation like the world holding its breath before some great exhalation. Your ancient nervous system reads the atmospheric changes with the accuracy of instruments, recognizing in the subtle shift of air density the approach of weather that will reshape the landscape for months to come. The first monsoon of the season carries promises and threats in equal measure, life-giving water and deadly floods, the renewal that comes through destruction. Ozone begins to taint the air with its sharp metallic taste, molecules charged by the massive electrical forces building in the towering clouds that blot out the afternoon sun. Your tongue samples this transformed atmosphere constantly now, processing information about wind direction and storm intensity through chemical analysis more precise than any human weather prediction. The very air crackles with potential, making your scales tingle with static electricity. Palm fronds begin their urgent rattling overhead, the first audible warning of what approaches. The sound builds from whisper to conversation to urgent discussion as wind speeds increase, transforming the forest canopy into a percussion section that announces the storm's arrival. You've weathered dozens of these seasonal transformations, but each one requires the same careful preparation, the same respect for forces that dwarf even apex predators. The initial raindrops arrive like advanced scouts, fat and warm and striking your scales with surprising force. These are not the gentle sprinkles of brief showers, but the dense, heavy drops that herald serious weather. Within minutes they multiply into streams, then sheets, then walls of water that transform the visible world into something grey and immediate and threatening. Your massive body begins to move with increasing urgency toward higher ground. Navigation becomes an exercise in reading water flow rather than familiar landmarks. The forest floor that served as your hunting ground for months transforms into a network of rushing streams, muddy torrents that turn familiar paths into ankle-deep rivers. Your powerful legs adapt to the changing terrain, claws finding purchase on rocks made slippery by the sudden deluge, balance adjusting to ground that shifts and slides beneath your weight. Thunder arrives with the kind of authority that makes even dragons acknowledge their place in nature's hierarchy. The sound rolls across the landscape like the breathing of some impossibly large creature, rattling in your chest cavity and triggering responses buried deep in reptilian genetic memory. Lightning follows, turning the storm-darkened forest into a strobing nightmare of illuminated rain and shadow, brief moments of crystal clarity between periods of near blindness. Your destination lies upslope, where ancient limestone has created caves and overhangs that offer protection from the worst of the weather. But reaching safety requires crossing terrain that becomes more treacherous with each passing minute. What had been dry creek beds now carry torrents capable of sweeping away creatures much larger than yourself. What had been solid earth now slides and shifts like quicksand. A particularly violent gust sends a dead tree crashing across your path, branches whipping past your head with lethal force. The storm has awakened a wild energy in the forest, turning every element into potential danger. Leaves become projectiles, streams become rivers, rivers become floods. The careful territorial boundaries that normally define your world dissolve under the assault of water and wind. You reach the first slope as the storm truly unleashes its power. Rain now falling in sheets so dense that breathing becomes a conscious effort. Each step upward is a negotiation with gravity and traction, your massive claws digging into mud that threatens to send you sliding back down toward the flooding lowlands. The scent of earth and vegetation being torn apart and rearranged fills your nostrils, the smell of a landscape in violent transition. The cave entrance appears through the grey curtain of rain, like salvation itself, a dark mouth in the limestone cliff that promises shelter from the chaos outside. You've used this refuge before, during previous seasons of transformation, and your body remembers the exact dimensions of the space, the depth needed to escape wind-driven rain, the elevated spots that will remain dry even if water finds its way inside. Safety comes with the profound relief that follows successful navigation of serious danger. From the cave mouth you can watch the storm complete its work of reshaping the island, streams becoming rivers, rivers becoming temporary lakes, the familiar geography of your territory transformed into something alien and urgent. This is the price and the gift of monsoon season destruction that enables renewal, chaos that creates opportunity. The burrows you knew will flood and collapse, forcing their inhabitants to seek new shelter or drown in the attempt. The deer trails will wash away, requiring game animals to establish new patterns of movement. The very shape of the coastline will change as streams cut new channels to the sea. When the storms pass, you will emerge into a landscape both familiar and strange, your kingdom remade by forces beyond any creature's control. Hours pass as the storm maintains its assault on the forest. You wait with the patience that defines successful predators, conserving energy while weather redesigns the world outside. This is not wasted time but necessary adaptation, the recognition that even apex predators must sometimes yield to powers greater than themselves. The island becomes a labyrinth of water, but you know that patience will eventually restore the pathways home. Climbing memory. The massive fig tree spreads its canopy like a cathedral roof above you, ancient limbs thick as smaller trees themselves, reaching in all directions toward light and space. Its presence triggers something unexpected in your consciousness, not the immediate tactical awareness that usually fills your thoughts, but a drift toward memory, toward the dragon you were before age, and size made you strictly terrestrial. The sight of those broad branches, worn smooth by countless seasons of wind and rain, carries you backward through your own history to a time when the world looked very different from these heights. You had been perhaps 3 feet long then, all quick muscle and nervous energy, small enough that the forest canopy represented safety rather than the impossibility it has become. Your juvenile body moved through the trees with the liquid grace that only comes to creatures born for 3-dimensional travel, claws finding purchase on bark and branch with automatic precision. The memory sits in your muscles still, that feeling of weightlessness as you flowed from tree to tree like some scaled river finding its way downhill. Those early years existed in a state of constant motion and hypervigilance that exhausts you to remember. Everything had been a potential threat. Then birds of prey large enough to consider a young dragon as viable prey, larger lizards that occupied the same ecological niche, even adult dragons whose territorial instincts made no distinction between juvenile and invader. Survival had depended on speed and stealth, and the ability to disappear into the canopy's green maze whenever danger approached from below. The hunting had been entirely different then, focused on prey that matched your size and capabilities, bird eggs and nestlings, insects fat with protein, small mammals whose speed meant nothing once you caught them in the narrow confines of a branch. You remember the delicate work of raiding nests, timing your approach to avoid returning parents, learning to judge which branches would bear your weight and which would snap and send you crashing toward the forest floor. Height had meant everything in those days, not just safety from ground-based predators, but access to a layer of the forest that most creatures never experienced. The canopy held its own weather patterns, its own seasons of flowering and fruiting that created opportunities for hunting and feeding, completely separate from the terrestrial world below. You had been part of an aerial ecosystem that existed parallel to the ground-level life you now dominated. The view from above had taught you geography in ways that walking the forest floor never could. From the higher branches you could see the shape of the island, the way valleys connected and ridges divided territory, the patterns of stream and clearing that would become crucial navigation knowledge in your adult life. That aerial perspective still influences how you move through your territory now, even though you can no longer access the vantage points that provided it. The transition from arboreal to terrestrial had happened gradually, your growing weight making higher branches increasingly precarious until even the lower ones began to creak warnings under your bulk. There had been no single moment of farewell to the canopy life, just a slow recognition that your size now demanded different strategies, different hunting grounds, different definitions of safety and danger. The trees that had once sheltered you became obstacles to navigate around rather than highways to travel through. With terrestrial life had come a different kind of power. No longer did you need to flee from larger predators or carefully judge the weight-bearing capacity of every branch. The ground became your domain through simple dominance few creatures, willing to challenge something that could grow to your current size. But power came with its own constraints. The recognition that stealth now meant different things, that hunting required patience rather than acrobatics. You find yourself studying the fig's massive trunk, noting handholds that your claws could still find purchase on, estimating how far up those powerful legs might carry you before weight and physics combined to make further progress impossible. The urge to climb surfaces, occasionally even now, triggered by threat or curiosity or simple nostalgia for the days when the entire forest served as your personal highway system. The scars on your scales tell the story of that transition, marking the encounters that taught you the rules of ground-level existence. Claw marks from rival dragons, tooth marks from prey that fought back with more success than expected, the accumulated evidence of learning to be something different than what you had been. Each scar represents adaptation, the painful process of becoming the creature that survival demanded, rather than the one instinct preferred. From your position beneath the fig, you can observe other creatures still living the arboreal life you abandoned. A monitor lizard half your current size flows along a branch with the kind of easy confidence you remember from your own youth. Its movements carry the unconscious grace that comes from perfect adaptation to environment, the same fluid motion that once carried you through this three-dimensional world. The contrast between then and now feels particularly sharp in this moment, where once you had been prey pretending to be predator, using speed and stealth to survive in a world full of larger threats. Now you are apex incarnate, a creature that other predators must account for in their own survival calculations. The trade-offs seem obvious. Power for mobility, dominance for the particular freedom that comes with being small enough to disappear into the canopy. Yet standing here in the fig's shadow, you acknowledge that both versions of yourself serve the same fundamental purpose: survival and reproduction, the basic imperatives that drive all life, simply expressed through different strategies at different life stages. The juvenile's speed and the adult's strength are merely tools in service of the same evolutionary goals, adaptations to the changing demands of growing up on an island where only the successful get to pass on their genes. The memory fades as present demands reassert themselves, but something of that aerial perspective lingers in how you survey your territory from ground level. Even now, your movements through the forest carry traces of the three-dimensional thinking that once navigated branch and vine. The dragon you were informs the dragon you are, juvenile wisdom translated into adult power, climbing memory transformed into terrestrial dominance. Parthenogenesis, wonders. The female moves through her territory with the unhurried purpose of a creature operating on biological schedules that human science is only beginning to understand. You observe her from a respectful distance, your presence tolerated but not welcomed, as she goes about the mysterious business of reproduction without any male participation. There had been no courtship season for her, no territorial battles or careful negotiations of space and intent. Instead, she carries within her body the capacity for something that seems to bend the fundamental rules of nature itself. Her movements speak to an internal clock that ticks according to hormonal rhythms rather than external cues. The careful selection of nesting sites, the methodical testing of soil temperature and composition, the way she samples the air for chemical signatures that will determine the success or failure of her reproductive effort. All of it proceeds with the kind of focused attention that suggests she is following genetic instructions written across millions of years of evolutionary experimentation. The nest chamber takes shape over several days of patient excavation, her powerful claws working to create the precise conditions that her developing eggs will require. The location itself represents a masterpiece of instinctive engineering, positioned to take advantage of decomposing vegetation that will generate heat through bacterial action, angled to provide drainage while maintaining humidity, concealed enough to avoid detection by egg predators, while remaining accessible for the careful monitoring that successful reproduction demands. You find yourself marveling at the quiet efficiency of the process, the way her body has activated systems that remain dormant in most females most of the time. This is parthenogenesis virgin birther reproductive strategy that your species maintains as backup programming for situations when normal mating becomes impossible. Whether triggered by isolation, stress, or some other environmental factor, it represents evolution's insurance policy against extinction. The scientific marvel of what you're witnessing operates on cellular levels that defy easy comprehension. Somewhere within her reproductive system, eggs have begun developing without the genetic contribution that normally comes from male sperm. Her body has essentially doubled the genetic material from her own cells, creating offspring that will be genetic clones of herself, female dragons, carrying identical DNA, living copies of their mother released into a world that makes no allowances for the circumstances of their creation. The eggs themselves, when she finally begins laying them, appear identical to those produced through conventional mating. White, leathery shells the size of goose eggs, each one containing the potential for a fully formed dragon that will emerge in 3 months, carrying her exact genetic blueprint. The sight triggers something profound in your understanding of reproduction. The recognition that life finds ways to continue even when normal pathways become blocked. Her behavior during the laying process carries an intensity that speaks to the biological significance of what she's accomplishing. Each egg receives careful positioning within the nest chamber, placement that will optimize temperature, exposure, and protection from the various threats that claim most dragon eggs before they can hatch. Her tongue constantly samples the air around the nest, monitoring for chemical changes that might indicate problems with decomposition rates or humidity levels. The covering process unfolds with ritualistic precision, layers of rotting vegetation and soil carefully arranged to create the microenvironment that developing dragons require. Too much heat and the embryos will cook in their shells. Too little and development will stall, leaving the eggs vulnerable to bacterial infection or simply failing to progress toward hatching. The mathematics of decomposition and temperature regulation exist in her genetic memory, knowledge encoded across generations of successful mothers. You consider the implications of what you're witnessing as she completes the burial process and begins the long period of vigilant guarding that will occupy the next several weeks. These offspring will emerge without the genetic diversity that usually comes from sexual reproduction, exact copies of their mother's DNA rather than unique combinations of maternal and paternal traits. In some species, this lack of genetic variation would represent a evolutionary dead end. For dragons, it serves as a survival mechanism that can bridge gaps between normal breeding opportunities. The territory around the nest takes on new significance now, transformed from ordinary hunting ground into something that must be defended with heightened aggression. She will tolerate no intrusion during the incubation period, her normally solitary nature intensifying into something approaching paranoia. Even your distant observation seems to register as potential threat, her golden eyes tracking your movements with the kind of attention that suggests she's calculating response strategies should you venture too close. Days pass in this state of watchful waiting, her massive body positioned to provide both protection and early warning of any approach. The nest itself remains invisible beneath its carefully constructed covering, but her presence marks it as clearly as any sign. Other creatures learn quickly to avoid this section of forest, their survival instincts recognizing the dangerous intensity of a dragon protecting her genetic investment. The biochemical processes occurring beneath the earth proceed according to ancient templates, cells dividing and specializing and organizing themselves into the complex structures that will eventually constitute fully formed predators. Each egg represents not just potential offspring, but the continuation of evolutionary strategies that have allowed dragons to survive mass extinctions and ice ages, and the dramatic environmental changes that have reshaped the Earth across geological time. The quietness of the nest chamber itself strikes you as somehow sacred, a hidden space where the fundamental miracle of development unfolds without fanfare or celebration, life creating itself through cellular division and genetic expression, following molecular instructions that encode the accumulated wisdom of millions of years of successful adaptation. The developing dragons carry within their forming nervous systems the same predatory instincts, the same territorial awareness, the same survival algorithms that have served your species since before mammals walked the earth. When the first subtle movements begin beneath the covering still weeks away, they will announce the success of this remarkable reproductive strategy. Young dragons emerging into the world, carrying genetic material identical to their mothers, equipped with all the instinctive knowledge that successful predation requires. Virgin births that prove evolution's remarkable capacity for finding alternative pathways when traditional routes become unavailable. The wonder of parthenogenesis lies not just in its scientific complexity, but in its representation of life's fundamental determination to continue. Even in isolation, even without the genetic diversity that sexual reproduction provides, the drive toward the next generation finds expression through cellular mechanisms that seem almost miraculous in their precision and effectiveness. Nature's emergency blueprint, activated by circumstances, but guided by the same evolutionary imperatives that drive all reproductive behavior. Poisoned edge. The morning brings scents that don't belong in any forest ecosystem, chemical signatures that speak to changes happening faster than adaptation can accommodate. Plastic polymers breaking down under UV exposure, synthetic fabrics shedding microfibers into stream systems, the metallic tang of batteries and electronic components, slowly leaching their contents into soil that has remained unchanged for thousands of years. Your ancient sensory systems process these alien molecules with the same precision they bring to detecting prey or predators, but the information they provide has no evolutionary context, no genetic memory to guide appropriate responses. The tourism paths cut through your territory like surgical scars, straight lines that ignore the natural topography and ancient animal trails your kind has followed for millennia. Fresh concrete markers driven into the earth emit their own chemical signatures, lime and Portland cement and various plastic additives, creating an olfactory landscape as foreign as another planet. These paths bring foot traffic during daylight hours, groups of humans moving with the confident noise of creatures who believe themselves apex predators in environments they neither understand nor respect. The wardens present a different category of threat, their presence marked by the sharp chemical signatures of tranquilizer compounds and the oiled metal scent of dart guns that can deliver unconsciousness from distances that make traditional dragon intimidation tactics irrelevant. They move through the forest with the kind of professional awareness that suggests training in dealing with dangerous wildlife, their body language carrying none of the excited unpredictability of tourists, but something more calculating and potentially more dangerous. Plastic waste has begun accumulating in the drainage patterns that carry runoff toward the sea, creating tangled barriers that alter water flow and trap smaller creatures in synthetic nets that don't biodegrade on any timeline that matters to individual animals. You've encountered deer with plastic bags wound around their legs, monitor lizards with bottle caps stuck on their claws, evidence of an industrial ecosystem imposing itself on a biological one without regard for compatibility or consequences. The flight paths overhead have increased in frequency, aircraft engines adding their exhaust to the atmospheric chemistry, while helicopter rotors generate noise pollution that disrupts the acoustic communication systems of countless species. The constant background thrum of distant engines has become part of the island's soundscape, as ubiquitous as insect buzz or bird calls, but carrying none of the evolutionary relevance that allows nervous systems to filter it as harmless background noise. Your territorial calculations now include threat assessment for activities that have no precedent in dragon experience. The cleaning crews that arrive periodically to remove trash create temporary zones of intense human activity that require careful avoidance. The maintenance vehicles that service the tourism infrastructure emit diesel exhaust and hydraulic fluid odors that mark their presence long before they become visible. Research teams with their electronic equipment generate electromagnetic signatures that seem to trigger vague unease in your nervous system, as if evolution recognizes technology as somehow fundamentally hostile to biological processes. The chemical contamination extends beyond simple pollution into more subtle forms of environmental degradation. Sunscreen compounds washed off human skin accumulate in the water systems that supply your drinking needs. Insect repellent residues coat vegetation in toxic films that affect the entire food web from insects, up through the birds and small mammals that constitute important prey species. The ecological disruption cascades through trophic levels in ways that make traditional predator strategies increasingly unreliable. Navigation requires constant adaptation to new human activities that reshape the landscape without warning or consideration for existing animal territories. Yesterday's safe travel route becomes today's construction zone, temporary but lasting long enough to force rerouting of hunting patterns that took months to establish. The placement of viewing platforms and rest areas seems designed to maximize tourist satisfaction while minimizing any consideration for the animals they claim to protect. Your instinctive threat ranking system struggles to categorize dangers that operate on timescales longer than individual encounters. The gradual accumulation of microplastics in the food web, the slow poisoning of water sources by agricultural runoff, the incremental habitat fragmentation caused by infrastructure development, all of these represent existential threats that unfold too slowly to trigger immediate defensive responses, but too quickly for evolutionary adaptation to keep pace. The irony of conservation tourism creates its own paradoxes, bringing revenue that supposedly funds protection while simultaneously increasing the very pressures that protection aims to address. The viewing blinds and elevated walkways that keep tourists at safe distances also create permanent human presence in areas that wildlife requires for essential behaviors like nesting and feeding. The compromise solutions satisfy human needs for controlled nature experiences, while failing to address the fundamental incompatibility between industrial tourism and functional ecosystems. Some mornings you find yourself testing the air for familiar scents that have become increasingly rare. The clean smell of unpolluted streams, the organic complexity of undisturbed soil systems, the particular atmospheric chemistry that exists only in the absence of internal combustion engines and synthetic chemicals. These baseline environmental conditions, taken for granted through millions of years of evolution, now exist only in fragmentary pockets that shrink with each passing season. The younger dragons showed different responses to these changed conditions, their behavior suggesting that adaptation might be possible for individuals who encounter contaminated environments from hatching onward. But the adaptations come at costs that won't become apparent until these animals reach breeding age, until the accumulated effects of lifetime exposure to industrial chemicals express themselves through reduced fertility or developmental abnormalities that compromise survival. The waste heat from increased human activity has begun altering the microclimates that regulate everything from egg incubation success to the timing of seasonal behaviors. Air conditioning units and vehicle engines create thermal pollution that disrupts the precise temperature relationships that reptilian reproduction requires. The concrete and asphalt surfaces that support tourism infrastructure absorb and radiate heat in patterns that bear no relationship to natural seasonal cycles. You find yourself spending increasing amounts of time in the remaining undeveloped areas of the island, territories that offer temporary refuge from the expanding network of human infrastructure, but which exist at the sufferance of development pressures that seem to intensify with each tourist season. These refugia function as life support systems for ecological processes that once operated across the entire landscape, compressed now into fragments that may be too small to maintain their essential functions over the long term. The wardens with their dart guns represent the leading edge of a management philosophy that views individual animals as problems to be solved rather than essential components of functional ecosystems. Their presence signals the transformation of natural habitat into something more like an outdoor zoo, where wildlife behavior is increasingly constrained by human convenience rather than ecological necessity. The chemical smell of their equipment serves as an olfactory reminder that even apex predators now exist at the discretion of a species that measures success by tourist satisfaction rather than ecosystem health. Silent night hunt. The moon hangs like a pale eye above the village, casting everything in silver and shadow. You move through this monochrome world with the patience of stone, each step a deliberate choice between silence and discovery. The scent trails tell their story before your eyes confirm it. Goats, chickens, the salt-sweet musk of human sleep, drifting from wooden houses raised on stilts. Your tongue flicks out, tasting the night air. Information floods your primitive brain in chemical whispers. 3 goats in the pen, closest to the forest edge. One limping slightly, weakness calls to something ancient in your blood. The wooden fence posts are weathered, gaps between the slats just wide enough for your massive head to pass through, if you're careful. You've done this dance 1,000 times across decades of hunting. The village sleeps, trusting in their fences and their fires, never quite understanding that you are older than their grandfathers' grandfathers, that you learned to read human patterns when their settlement was just cleared earth and ambitious dreams. Each footfall requires calculation. Your claws, curved like scimitars, must find purchase without scraping against stone or cracking dry leaves. The weight of your body, 200 pounds of muscle and ancient hunger, shifts forward with geological slowness. You are erosion in reverse, gathering momentum grain by grain. The first goat senses something wrong before it sees you. Its head lifts, ears twitching toward shadows that shouldn't move, but you've already frozen, become part of the landscape once more. Minutes pass. The goat's attention drifts back to whatever goats dream about in their simple minds. You study the pen's construction like an engineer examining blueprints. These humans build predictably, corner posts driven deep, horizontal slats nailed at knee height to keep their livestock contained. But they think like humans, not like hunters who've spent lifetimes learning to flow like water through the smallest spaces. The gap between the third and fourth slat calls to you. Wide enough. If you compress your shoulders just so, if you time the movement between the goat's wandering attention, your neck extends, testing the space, feeling the rough wood brush against your scales. The sensation triggers memories, dozens of similar nights, similar fences, the eternal dance between predator and prey, playing out under countless moons. Your massive head slides through the gap with surprising grace. For a creature built like a living siege engine, you move with the fluid precision of spilled mercury. One shoulder follows, then the other, your body contorting in ways that would seem impossible if anyone were awake to witness it. Inside the pen now, you become stillness itself. The goats continue their restless shuffling, unaware that death has joined their midnight gathering. The limping one stands apart from the others, favoring its left hind leg. Easy prey, but you've learned patience from decades of hunting. The easy kill isn't always the quiet kill. You wait. Minutes stretch like hours. Your heart beats slowly, efficiently, pumping cold blood through a system designed for endurance rather than speed. Everything about you speaks of geological time, of patience, measured in seasons rather than seconds. The moment arrives with the subtlety of shifting shadows. The healthy goats drift toward the far corner of the pen, drawn by some scent or sound you can't detect. The injured one remains behind, head lowered, chewing thoughtfully on something it's found in the straw. Now, your body uncoils like a released spring. 40 million years of evolutionary perfection condense into 3 seconds of pure predatory motion. Your jaws gape wide, revealing teeth like broken glass, and your legs drive forward with power that could shatter bones. The goat's head snaps up, eyes white with sudden terror. It tries to leap away, but its injured leg betrays it. Your jaws close around its neck with the finality of a steel trap. The other goats explode into panicked motion, bleating alarm calls that slice through the night's silence like rusty knives. But you're already moving, your prey secured, your body pivoting toward the gap in the fence. The village stirs. A dog begins barking somewhere in the distance. A baby cries. Someone shouts in a language you've heard for generations, but never needed to understand. Your shoulders compress again as you squeeze back through the fence, the goat's body a warm weight in your jaws. The taste of blood floods your mouth, triggering satisfaction circuits older than consciousness itself. Behind you, the remaining goats continue their terrified chorus, but you're already melting back into the forest's embrace. The pursuit will come, as it always does. Men with torches and angry voices, dogs straining against ropes, the whole predictable drama of human outrage. But you know these mountains better than they know their own villages. You'll be miles away before they organize themselves enough to matter. You pause at the forest's edge, still holding your prize, and look back at the settlement. Lights flicker to life in windows like fallen stars. Voices carry on the night air, sharp with fear and frustration. They'll tell stories about this raid, embellishing the details with each retelling until tonight becomes legend. Good. Fear keeps them careful. Careful humans stay in their villages after dark, leaving the night to creatures like you. The moon watches impassively as you disappear into the trees, carrying your midnight feast toward the rocky den, where you'll consume it in solitude. Just another successful hunt in a lifetime of successful hunts. Another night, when the ancient contract between predator and prey renewed itself under indifferent stars. Tomorrow they'll strengthen their fences. Next month, you'll find new weaknesses. The dance continues, as it has for decades, as it will for decades more. Final sun. Your ancient body settles onto the cliff's edge, with the careful precision of failing joints and wisdom earned through countless sunrises. Below, the ocean spreads endlessly, its surface catching light like scattered diamonds. Each wave that crashes against the rocks sends vibrations through stone and bone, a rhythm you've felt more times than any creature should live to count. The sun climbs slowly above the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. You've watched this same celestial performance for longer than the villages below have existed, longer than their grandfathers could remember in their longest stories. Time moves differently when you carry it in your bones, when each year adds another layer to the sediment of memory. Your scales catch the morning light, revealing the accumulated scars of decades. That pale line across your left flank, a wild boar's desperate last strike 30 years ago. The missing tip of your tail, a foolish encounter with a water buffalo that taught you respect for horned prey. Each mark tells a story, and your body has become a living manuscript of survival. Below, younger dragons patrol the morning hunting grounds. You watch them with the detached interest of experience, observing ambition. They move with the confident swagger of creatures who still believe the world belongs to them, who haven't yet learned that survival is a temporary arrangement, not a permanent conquest. One particularly bold juvenile stalks a deer through the tall grass, telegraphing his intentions with every eager movement. You remember that hunger, that certainty, that speed and strength could overcome any obstacle. The deer escapes, of course. The young dragon's frustrated hiss carries up the cliff face, and you almost smile, if dragons could smile. You learned patience the hard way, through empty bellies and failed hunts, through seasons when prey was scarce and competitors were many. These youngsters will learn the same lessons, or they won't survive to grow old enough to matter. Evolution cares nothing for individual stories, only for the species' long march through time. Memory stacks upon memory like shed skins. You remember when this cliff was half its current height, before some ancient earthquake split the rock and raised your vantage point toward the sky. You remember when the forest below stretched unbroken to the ocean, before humans arrived with their axes and their ambitious plans. The first settlement was just a handful of huts clustered around a freshwater spring. You were already adult then, already wise enough to know that humans meant change. They multiplied like insects, their numbers growing from season to season until their village sprawled across the entire valley floor. You adapted. That's what survivors do. When they fenced their livestock, you learned to read their patterns, to strike when their attention wandered. When they brought dogs, you discovered the art of killing silently in the pre-dawn darkness. When they organized hunting parties, you moved your territory deeper into the mountains, claiming territory the humans considered too remote to matter. 50 years of mutual adaptation, predator and prey locked in an evolutionary dance as old as life itself. They told stories about you around their fires, the ancient dragon who haunted their dreams, the shadow that stole their goats and vanished like smoke. You became legend while still breathing, myth walking on scaled feet. But legends grow old, just like everything else. Your hunting range has shrunk with your aging body. The high mountain passes that once seemed like effortless highways now require careful planning and frequent rest. Your reactions, while still deadly, have lost the explosive speed that once made you invisible death incarnate. The young dragons below represent the future, your future, in a way. When your body finally fails, when your last hunt becomes truly your last, they'll inherit these territories. They'll patrol these valleys, raid these villages, become the new nightmares in human stories told around dying fires. The thought brings neither sadness nor satisfaction. It simply is, like sunrise and sunset, like the endless cycle of waves against stone. You've lived longer than most of your kind ever manage, seen more seasons change than should fit into any single lifetime. The debt of existence will eventually come due, as it does for every creature that draws breath. But not today. Today, the sun warms your ancient bones, and the ocean spreads before you like a promise of infinity. Today, you're still the apex predator of these mountains, still the shadow that makes humans check their locks twice before sleeping. Today, the story continues. A fishing boat appears on the horizon, its sail a white triangle against blue immensity. You watch it with idle curiosity, wondering about the humans aboard. Do they know that ancient eyes observe their passage? Do they sense the weight of history watching from stone cliffs older than their civilization? Probably not. Humans excel at ignoring inconvenient truths, at pretending they're the only intelligence that matters in this world. It served them well, this selective blindness. It's also made them predictable prey for creatures patient enough to study their habits. The boat disappears around the headland, carrying its cargo of human dreams toward whatever destination drives their restless species. You settle more comfortably against the warm stone, content to let the day unfold at its own pace. Time moves slowly. When you've learned to measure it properly, the sun will arc across the sky, the shadows will shift and dance. The ocean will continue its eternal conversation with the shore, and you'll be here to witness it all, ancient guardian of a world that's forgotten how to listen to its oldest voices. Below, the young dragons continue their education in survival. Above, clouds drift like slow thoughts across an infinite sky. And somewhere between earth and heaven, you rest in the knowledge that today, at least, you remain exactly what you've always been: apex predator, living legend, the last word in a conversation that began before humans learned to make fire. The ocean glitters with indifferent beauty, and you watch it all with eyes that have seen empires of insects rise and fall, with patience earned through decades of perfect predatory focus. This is enough. This has always been enough.